Columbus, Georgia, this is your City Council. Mayor Teresa Tomlinson. City Manager Isaiah Hughley. Pops Barnes, District 1. Glenn Davis, District 2. Bruce Huff, District 3. Evelyn Turner Pugh, Mayor Pro Tem and District 4. Mike Baker, District 5. Gary Allen, District 6. Mimi Woodson, District 7. Walker Garrett, District 8. Judy Thomas, Post 9 at-large Counselor. Skip Henderson, Post 10 at-large Counselor. Tiny Washington, Clerk of Council. And City Attorney, Clifton Fay. Columbus, Georgia, this is your City Council.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. Well, as you can see, I'm Evelyn Pugh, Mayor Pro Tem. The mayor is not here with us today, so bear with me in this mic system. First, we're going to have our invocation by Pastor Marty Wynn, Lighthouse Baptist Church. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. We appreciate the work that you men and ladies do. Thank you so much. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you today for the grace and the mercies that you have given us. We thank you so much for the gift of your precious Son, Jesus Christ, who died for our sins. We thank you for the leadership of our government that you have established and ordained. We pray for our city leaders today. We pray that you will give each of our council people wisdom, discernment, direction. We pray for each man and woman represented on the council today. We pray for our Mayor Pro Tem as she presides over this meeting. We pray as they make the decisions that they will make decisions that will have a positive impact on our city and its citizens. We thank you for their willingness to serve, and we pray that you might be with them today. Again, we thank you for our leadership. We thank you for their direction of our city. We pray that your hand will be upon them in this hour. We thank you for your goodness and your grace, and we thank you for these things. We ask for these things in the name of your precious Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Reverend Wynn, thank you, and give thanks to your congregation for us, please. If you all would please stand, we'll have with us today, and this is the June 13th, 2017 meeting. We have with us the Puddle Jumpers from the Daycare Center. And they will lead us in the pledge. And if you will, tell us your name and how old you are.
My name is Colton and I'm 5. I'm Collier and I'm 6.5. My name is Kane and I'm 7. My name is Lily and I'm 9. My name is Jordan and I'm 7. My name is Addison and I'm 6. My name is Mackenzie and I'm 8. My name is Bradley and I'm 6. My name is Dominique and I'm 6. My name is Chad and I'm 9. My name is Grayson and I'm 7. My name is Luke and I'm 6. My name is Kinsley and I'm 8. My name is Christopher and I'm 6.
If the teachers will introduce yourselves.
Okay, I'm Amanda, and I'm gonna pass.
I am Miss Sweet.
I am Joycelyn.
I'm Corey.
Thank you. Let's give them another hand. And to the puddle jumpers, thank you so much for being with us today, and come back to see us again, okay?
Thank you for having us.
I will now turn the mic over to the city attorney. By law, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights public hearing has to happen.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Today, we call the last Taxpayer Bill of Rights hearing. This is required when we have a tentative increase in the tax digest in Muskogee County. That does not mean that your taxes will increase if you have a homestead assessment freeze, but it does mean there is a projected increase in the tax digest. Ms. Alexander is here from Finance, and if anybody in the audience wants to be heard, please raise your hand. Okay, you want to tell them what's on the record?
Sure. Good morning.
Good morning.
As Mr. Fay indicated, this is the third and final meeting for the FY18 budget Taxpayer Bill of Rights hearing. And just as Mr. Fay indicated, each year the Board of Tax Assessors is required to review the assessed property taxes, assessed taxable property in the county. And when there's an increase in the fair market value of commercial property, or if there's an increase to the fair market value of residential property due to alterations, the Board of Tax Assessors is required by law to redetermine the value of that home. So this is called a reassessment, and what the city must do is calculate a millage rate to determine what the millage rate, the rollback millage rate would be had no reassessments occurred. And so the projected increase that we've advertised is 7%. That's the projected increase over the rollback millage rate. The millage rate for FY18 is actually a little bit less in total than it was in FY17 across all urban service districts. And again, just to reiterate what Mr. Fay said, this is not an individual tax increase for individual homeowners with homestead exemptions. Only if you made alterations to your property would a reassessment would have occurred. This is, again, required by law. We have to publish the advertisement as required by state. There's no deviation that we can make to the language of the advertisement. And so that's it.
Any other questions around the table?
I see
All right.
none.
Okay, that concludes the, oh, we got to hear it. Somebody in the audience want to be heard? Okay. All right, well, that will conclude the hearings required by Title 48, 48.532.1. Thank you, Ms. Alexander.
Thank you, Attorney Fay.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, we're ready to go into the business meeting unless you have something else.
No.
All right. First item on our agenda, we need to vote on the operating budget. This is for FY18 as amended by council last week.
It has been properly moved in second. And this is the operating budget, right?
Correct.
Are there any questions? I see none. All those in favor of that motion? And Bruce is going to operate the voting system for me, so. Okay, that's approved.
Need Mr. Davis.
Who's Miss?
Mr. Davis.
Glenn. Counselor Davis. Counselor Davis' light is not on. We-
Okay, that has passed. Next item, mayors and non-operating budgets with the various funds shown. It's ready for adoption.
It has been properly moved in second. There are no questions.
Okay, it passes. Next item is the solid waste amendment for low-income households. It's ready for adoption.
It has been properly moved in second. I see no questions.
That passes. Next item is the Health and Wellness Center cancellation, no-show policy and accompanying fee. Ready for adoption.
It has been properly moved in second. I see no questions.
Okay, that passed. Next item, I'm going to call 5, 6, 7, and 8 together, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay.
These are all the pension contributions for general government, public safety, disability income plan, and death benefit escrow. They're all ready for adoption.
It has been properly moved in second. I see no questions.
What are we missing? One more? Okay. That has passed. Ms. Clerk, if you'll register all those passing 5, 6, 7, and 8. Number 9 is the fee increase for non-prorated, non-refundable administrative fee and licensing issues. It's ready for adoption.
It has been properly moved in second. I see no questions.
Okay. That, a new $75 fee, that has passed. Next item is the first reading zoning matter. This is 1340 29th Street, going from light manufacturing to single-family 4, recommended for conditional approval. Is the petitioner here? All right. Let's see if anybody has got questions or is opposed to it. Any questions around the table?
No, sir.
All right, anybody in the audience here on this zoning? You can make a presentation, but it's not required.
It's really not necessary for me to do it.
All right.
I've been fighting this thing for quite some time, and I want to get it over with. It's been going on for several years, and I've had a problem with...
Sir, will you give your name, please?
This Mr.
Pardon
Bond.
me?
Give him your name, please. Is it
I'm
Mr.
Louis
Bond? Right.
I had a problem with things at this place, at this same property, water problems. And I have fought it till I have give up on it. And I've decided to get rid of it if I have to give it away. I've had one person in this council that I have called, just tried to call every one of them, Mr. Barnes right there. He's the only person on this council that's ever made any effort whatsoever to help me. And this has been going on for 5 years. And I thank y'all.
Okay, any other questions? All right, we'll vote on that next week. It's a 5:30 PM meeting. Okay. All right, right, Mayor Pro Tem, the next item is zoning matter at 4602 17th Avenue, going from single-family 3 to general commercial. Is the petitioner here? All right. Again, we'll see if there are questions or opposition. Anybody in the audience want to be heard? Any questions of council while this gentleman is here? We'll vote on it next week then.
Wait a minute.
Appreciate it. Anything? You got a question? Okay,
Councilor
Ms. Thomas
Thomas.
has a question. Come on up and let the petitioner give his name and address for the record.
David Bone, 6852 Copper Oaks Court here in Columbus.
As I understand where this property is, it's after you turn off Manchester Expressway on the 17th across from the little shopping center and St. Francis Hospital, is that right?
No, it's behind the Sonics and next door to Circle K on Manchester.
Behind,
The Sonics,
oh, okay, I'm
Yeah.
a block too
yeah, you're
far.
blocked now.
Okay. Okay, that makes a lot of difference. And this is to be used auto sales, is that
Yes, ma'am.
what you're wanting to put in there?
It used to be a car lot years ago, but since then the city changed the ordinance. You have to have a minimum of a half an acre, which I will have now.
Okay, the location was what I was a little concerned about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Jones?
Madam Pro Tem and members of council, there's one other thing you need to know about this application. The application before you today is just for the rezoning of the property. As he has indicated to you, he's got to have at least, the ordinance now requires basically 2 acres for a car lot, a used car lot of any type from that. He won't have that. If the rezoning, if you approve the rezoning next week, he'll come right back on that same council meeting and ask for a special exception, which basically says under a special exception, anything greater than a half an acre to 2 acres requires a special exception use. So you would be approving the rezoning next week, and you may also be asked to approve the special exception to allow the car lot on that site. So we'll make sure we understand that. That's going to be the procedure for next week.
All right, you heard that, Mr. Bone. So you stick around next week for 2 votes. There'll be a vote on the rezoning and a vote on your special exception request. All right, is that it? Okay. Next item, we have a zoning requested at 4008 University Avenue, going from residential multifamily 2 to residential office. It's recommended for approval. I know Mr. Mize is here with the applicant. Are there any questions or anybody want to be heard in the audience? Okay? Doesn't appear to be, Mr. Mize. We'll vote on that next week. Okay, the next zoning item, Mayor, is Victory Drive. This is 1301 Victory Drive, going from heavy manufacturing to general commercial. We had some discussion earlier. We thought that this was possibly going to be delayed because of the requirement for inpatient facilities to go through the Regional Planning Commission, but Mr. Jones has explained that state law says that this type facility is outpatient only. So as far as I understand, there will be no motion to delay, but if anybody's got questions, Mr.
Councilman
Jones is
Woodson.
here. Come on around, Rick.
One moment, I think I might be looking at the wrong one. The one we're talking about is 1301 Victory Drive.
Yes, ma'am.
Medical office
I'm a little
development.
bit confused because, oh, okay, the property is currently being used. Okay, I got confused. I thought it was the other way around.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Let me ask you.
This is at Victory Drive and Jackson Avenue.
The Did you have a question,
Any other
Councilman Woodson?
questions?
No, I'm good.
Councilor
I got
Davis?
confused for a moment.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I do have a couple concerns, and I think it's more along the lines of clarification and just having a discussion just to get it out on the table and make sure we're all on the same page. And I don't think it's a mystery that it's somewhat well, for lack of a better word, just flip a coin or speculation from a standpoint of we don't know what is happening with the development that's potentially going to take place in our community. But there's a lot of, opportunities throughout our city for development. And I guess I'm mainly talking about the site selection of a VA clinic. As the council remembers, I think it went out at one time and a site selection was picked. For whatever reason, they came back and went back out and took bids. And I think this is what we're seeing today. We're probably going to see some others that they're all subject to rezoning. They have to be rezoned to meet the requirements of such a development. So with that being said, and I don't have any issues with that, I do think the city attorney has come to my attention. I do want to just, for the record's sake, just make sure that all this is in compliant with the codes and the UDO. And, I think the part that I question would be where it talks about, even though it's an outpatient facility, it does talk about traffic counts. And it uses the word or. So, in the legal world, that can mean either or, and it could mean two different issues. And, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to get into that, but I think for the record, from that standpoint, I think it just needs to be clarified so everybody's on the same playing field, and it's a level playing field across the board.
Okay.
And right now, the way I just learned this morning, before that, it was, there was some concern about it being not in compliance with the UO, and then this morning I found out it's subject to a definition. I just want to make sure that that's subject to the definition is not just one or two people's interpretation. I want to make sure that it is correct and accurate. That's the clarification aspect.
The question here is what we call, what the state really calls this thing called developments of regional impact. Quick history lesson on that was it was really designed more for the Atlanta area in terms of making sure all these local governments in the Atlanta area work together. When one had a project that impacted another, they were certainly got into controversy about it. So they applied it to the entire state, and it really has, there's thresholds that we have to meet when a certain development comes in. And we're looking at one now, that not this one in particular, we got one now that we're getting ready to have to do a DRI on. We'll bring it to you at a later time. But there is there are requirements in our UDO that say under 10.29 called developments of regional impact. And Councilor Davis, as I explained to you, what we have done with these 14 or so items, we copied those straight out of state law. We put them into the UDO. So we weren't in conflict in any way or fashion about that. The issue here is there is on here, one of the thresholds is dealing with hospitals and healthcare facilities, where it says with the state law and our UDO clearly says new hospitals and healthcare facilities greater than 300 new beds or generating more than 375 peak hour trips, car trips, vehicle trips per day. Though if it meets that kind of criteria, it automatically kicks into a DRI, which means then we have to make application, or the applicant has to make application to the regional commission here. They review it, send it to the state, and the state gets it back to us and goes through that process and looks at it. We've done that before. In hearing the question, though, about does this really trip this idea of its hospitals and healthcare facilities, I went back to our UDL. There's not a definition dealing with hospitals and healthcare facilities. There is one, though, in state law. And I gave my copy of that this morning to Mr. Fay, but it clearly says in there that hospitals and healthcare facilities are those facilities that have inpatient care. Inpatient care means they're going to spend the night. They have hospital room for it, just like any of the other hospital involved with that. And it's clear in there to me, it says inpatient care. That's what they're looking for. This, my understanding in dealing with these potential clinics, these VA clinics, is they're not having any type of inpatient care. everything's outpatient. They go, they make the doctor's visit, they do whatever they need to do, and they go home. They're not spending the night. With that in mind, it doesn't, from the planning department's perspective, it does not trip the requirement for a DRI. What does concern us, and we did look at it again this morning, I looked at in terms of the actual number of trip generations it makes. Your staff report will show you that we're projecting about a little over 6,000 daily trips in and out of that site. If this was any other normal roadway system, I would really be concerned about it. Well, we're out there on Victory Drive, where right now we're still operating at a level service B, which is a good level of service for us. C is what we try to maintain throughout the community. And in C, looking at our records this morning, you could go as high as 49,000 cars before you hit into what's considered a level service D, which would really upset the whole road system out there from that standpoint. Bottom line is this project appears to be able to absorb, or at least the roadway system itself can absorb what traffic they will generate. But again, going back to the DRI, is our opinion that it does not meet that requirement and should not have to file for a DRI with the Regional Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. The discussion, the other part of the discussion, that would be clarification there. Has there been a traffic study that's been done as a developer or representative, done a traffic study on this?
Not to my knowledge, it has not.
Is it required to do a traffic study in these
If
cases?
we felt like it was the road system could not handle the additional traffic, then we would have required one at that time. But again, looking at generally the numbers we run from the professional tables we pull from, which are used throughout the nation, we didn't think it warranted another traffic study this time.
How about, since it's on a major state thoroughfare, is it subject to DOT approval? Does it have to be DOT approval before we
Yes,
approve a rezoning, or is this subject to the DOT approval?
It's like anything else in terms of the
improvements.
development phase of a project, just like you do with any type of infrastructure. They will have to make application to the Georgia Department of Transportation for that driveway permit or curb cut, however you want to call it. And Georgia DOT makes that call. It is not necessarily a requirement of the zoning process at this stage of the game. It's nice to know, but in dealing with what they've already got on that piece of property in terms of the existing curb cuts, I don't know they're going to have a difficult time with that. They'll have to show what they're going to do. They may have to bring that driveway or curb cut up to bigger standards. But it's not necessarily a requirement this time for the rezoning.
Well, my last concern, being that it is subject to a DOT approval, and coming out of a very dangerous curve on a major thoroughfare, Victory Drive, 3-lane, it just, traffic light comes to my mind, D-cell, X-cell lanes, extension of lanes. Who's going to be responsible for all the improvements, whatever comes out of the DOT study and what they're going to require? Who's going to be responsible for that?
We would require the developer to be responsible for that.
Have they already said that they would?
I have
They
not
would make
had
those
that.
developments?
To be honest, Councilor Davis, I have not had that conversation with them this time.
Are they here? Is Mr. Carmack here? Okay. Come on up, sir. He's asking if DOT requires certain traffic measures, or are y'all going to be willing to put those in, like a traffic light or a decel lane?
Hello, my name is Will Bergen. I'm the owner of the parcel in question. Are you asking whether we're going to do our dead level best to rezone and put in a development on 20-plus acres in the Blanchard Industrial Park? Is that the question, Counselor?
No, you want to know the question?
The question is, we were happy to do what it takes to redevelop and make that a productive site.
Sir, I'm asking you, if a traffic light has to go in, if D-cell, X-cell lanes have to go in, any other road improvements, are you going to be willing to pay that money?
Yes, I am.
That's all I ask. Thank you,
That's it.
sir.
All right, that covers that question. Are there any others? Anybody else in the audience want to be heard? Doesn't require an amendment if DOT will require it as a condition of occupancy. Normally, we would put it in our ordinance as a condition.
Does it need to be a part of the ordinance?
It does not have to be. It can be.
Well, I'll make a motion that it's subject to the ordinance.
All right. Now, that will be something similar to all DOT traffic improvements will be installed and maintained by the developer.
And that's no different than we've done with many other developers, including one I see in the room today.
It has,
Okay.
the amendment has been properly moved in second. I see no more questions. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you.
All right, Mr. Bergen, that's been amended, but we'll vote on it next week. That's just DOT required improvements. Okay, any other questions around the table? Got Councilor Thomas?
Mr. Jones, if this property then becomes, well, whatever it becomes, it's subject to the overlay?
Yes,
Do we
ma'am.
have an overlay on Victory Drive?
Yes, ma'am, it will be.
And typically, when we get a site plan, it shows some of those things, and this doesn't show any buffer or anything on the site plan. Would you remind me of what is required, particularly on Victory Drive? I don't know about Jackson Avenue, but I know on Victory Drive, we have some requirements.
Generally, Council Thomas, when property is general commercial and it abuts up against a light manufacturer, heavy manufacturing zone, there isn't much requirement for buffering itself. I don't think that's going to be the case in here. If you want to make that part of the ordinance, that's fine too, but I would hope in fact, they're going to have to meet some buffering requirements in terms of dealing with the parking lot, no, from that standpoint.
That's my major concern, is the parking lot.
Yes, ma'am.
And what you can see from Victory Drive. As I said, this site plan doesn't show anything, but that doesn't mean that there are not some plans to do that.
We're showing in the staff report here this morning again that they're going to have to meet at least a category C here. I don't want to misspeak here, which basically shows, again, that they give them the three options of either 20 feet of canopy trees around the site, or 10 feet of shrubs, or 30 feet of undisturbed buffer. There is still a buffering requirement in there. They may not have shown it as if we need to see it, but there will be some buffering required on this.
Will there be buffering required on Jackson or just on Victory?
For the street itself, yes, ma'am. We require some street buffering from that vantage point, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, with that amendment, we'll bring it back next week for a vote, Mayor Pro Tem. The next item up is the countywide millage ordinance. This is going to involve revised schedule for payments that's been sent around the table. The taxpayers will have the benefit of more time in this particular calendar year, all the way to December 1, before property tax payments are made. One time only, not two installments this year, and that's been passed around. We're going to let the tax assessors come up, Ms. Middleton, and let's see, where's John? They're here. If they come up, please give them your name and address for the record. Talk about the revaluation that's been going on, reassessments for the last couple of years, and getting that entered into the system.
My name is John Williams. I'm at 8225 Chapel Lake Drive in Midland. I'm the Deputy Chief Appraiser. Ms. Middleton is the Chief Appraiser. I brought with me today Mary Griffin, who is the Project Manager for the software conversion for Tyler Technologies. We just have a short presentation on the original project agenda and the agenda that we're under now today. Of course, ask any questions you have of me or Ms. Mary. She's probably the best qualified individual to answer questions regarding the conversion itself and the project where it stands to date. But I'll just go ahead and go through this. Some of this you saw over a year ago. Let me draw your attention to one thing at the top of this title, OASIS System Upgrade. That's the actual software conversion. When I talk about a software conversion, it's from the old OASIS to the new IAS World software. The other aspect of this was the real property reassessment project. So we actually had two projects going, coinciding with one another throughout this last 2 years. The IAS World software upgrade was a web-based software upgrade for the Board of Tax Assessors Property Assessment and the Tax Commissioner's Office. It included a public access website module as well. Reassessment services for taxable real property included street-level imagery, data verification, valuation, and then culminating with support of those values. The original project timeline, as you see, December Tax Commissioner go live. May of this year, our Board of Tax Assessors go live. And when you see go live, that means the software is, the switch is turned on and we're operating with that software. So for my office, the Board of Tax Assessors, we went live May 1. The public access website went live as well on May 1 with, June 1, with the intent of running that coinciding with a month of QPublic. That is a software, it's more of a portal with QPublic, their third-party vendor. We now own and operate our own website that the public has access to, not only all of our information, tax assessment records, property records, zoning, etc., but the tax commissioner's records as well, at least the records that she would want to make public. So that's all on that public access website, and it's live today. We schedule for the annual assessment notices to go out in June. The property tax bills would be mailed at August 1, and our first installment due date at that time in the original agenda was to be October 1. I'll advance now to the proposed project timeline. This came out from a meeting yesterday between the city manager, the city attorney, Ms. Hodge, the city finance director. Angelica was there as well. Ms. Lula Huff and one of her assistants was there. Ms. Betty and I were also at the meeting. So this timeline stems from that. If you go back to the previous slide, the annual assessment notices were to be put out in June. The new agenda is still in June, but it's June 30. That's our proposed no later than time for our assessments to be mailed. There's a mandated, state-mandated 45-day appeal period that starts from the day those notices are mailed. So 45 days from June 30 is August 14th. Once that 45-day appeal period has transpired, one thing that we're in tune with this year that's different from other years, because of the county-wide revaluation that we're doing, we must remain within 8% of those parcels. We can't have more than 8% of our total parcel, taxable parcels, appeal. That number is about 5,900, roughly. As a matter of fact, another slide has 5,662 appeals. If we go over 8% appeals, what that means is we have to start working those appeals and get below that 8% limit before the tax commissioner can take the digest to Atlanta. So that 8% is a little different on a reassessment year. Just for reference, our highest appeal to record, I say to record after conferring with Ms. Betty, the highest number of appeals that she recalls in her 52 years of service, 53, I'm sorry, is about 2,000. The next highest level of appeal number is about 1,200. So that gives you some perspective of where that 5,600 number would fall into. That would be almost 3 times our normal appeal. We do anticipate a higher number of appeals because of the revaluation, but we all believe that we will fall below that 8%. August 31st, the Board of Tax Assessors delivers the digest to the Tax Commissioner. The following portion of the agenda really falls into Ms. Huff's purview. September 1, the Tax Commissioner receives that digest from us. She will need to file a request for an extension with Atlanta. That digest is due September 1. So she's going to automatically file for an extension with the state. She will review the digest, submit the digest to the state for approval, and prepare the tax bills. She is giving herself 30 days to do those 4 steps. So October 1, the tax commissioner mails the tax bills, and that will be the postmark date that they will work from there. If you notice, the first bullet under December 1 taxpayer taxes are due, the state law provides the taxpayer 60 days to pay once tax bills have been mailed based on the postmark date. So that prior postmark date of October 1, 60 days from that date is December 1. The first installment payment due date for 2017 is eliminated due to the project's impact on the billing schedule. Tax bills can be paid early and partial payments will be accepted, but the full balance is due December 1. December 2, taxpayers' taxes are delinquent. Interest shall begin to accrue on that date. December 20, the penalties accrue. That concludes the brief the brief presentation on where we were on our agenda and where we are today. Let me just go back to here. I will take any of your questions.
Are there any questions? Councilor Thomas?
What kind of activity have you decided to do in order to make sure that these new dates are out there and known by not only the taxpayers, but, my taxes are paid by escrow? You know, how are we making sure that the banks and everybody knows that these dates have been tweaked somewhat?
The tax commissioner communicates that. It'll be on the bill that goes out, and they'll also, I'm going to use the word tape, a digital file that goes out to the lenders from the tax commissioner. And again, I'm speaking for the tax commissioner's office, but the little bit I understand about how they work, they will be the ones communicating those new dates to all the parties that are concerned.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilor Allen?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, we normally have 2 pay dates. The public is allowed to have 2 different dates to pay their property taxes.
Yes.
We're not doing that this year. We're only going to have 1 date, and that'll be December.
Yes.
Okay. They'll be notified October, and it'll be due no later than December 1st.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there any way that you can go back and communicate that differently to the public so that they understand what's going on?
I'm not so sure what you mean by communicate differently. We will communicate the tax commissioner. It'll be on the bill that they get. Now that will be later than the normal bill that would go out for the October 1 payment.
Okay.
Will we communicate with
Okay, John Doe, Columbus,
sir.
Georgia, is going to receive their tax bill.
Yes.
And they're going to assume, they'll probably not read it very carefully. They will assume that they pay one part of it at some point and another part later. They're not understanding that there's a different system this time. So how are you going to account for that?
Again, my only thought would be that the tax commissioner would make the appropriate announcements, notices. We can put that on our public access website that I talked about earlier. We can put notices on that, put it on the CCG website. I hate to speak for the tax commissioner, but she will be the one to notify taxpayers on that bill. And as you said, they're not always read completely. The upside, if you will, they can make a payment in October if they choose to. If they just didn't read it and went ahead with their normal payment methodology, that would work fine. They're going to accept those early payments. They're just not due till December.
It seems as though we would need you to work with the commissioner, maybe to put a different insert on the cover.
Councilor Allen, the city manager had a response for you.
Well, I'd like to finish my question, if
Yes, sir.
Is that possible?
Yes, sir. We can work directly with the tax commissioner and do whatever's needed, according to her, what she decides. We'll work with her.
Okay. I yield, Mayor Pro Tem.
And thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. As John indicated, we met with all parties yesterday to make sure that we would bring this to you and the public today to start the conversation. What I'd like to do is convene another meeting with the tax commissioner, tax assessor, and all the parties, and maybe outline a strategy for communication. And then we do have a council meeting next week, and let me bring that back to you as an update on my agenda, what that strategy will be.
Okay. I would like to hear some clarification on why it was delayed from June 1st to June 30th, the notices.
Sure.
Sure. The first part that began this delay, and it goes back to May 1st was always our target date to get all the values approved by the Board of Assessors. And just a brief summary, not to try to educate you on how we work. We, with Tyler Technology, created or basically came up with these values. They were shown to our staff, residential, commercial staff, and then they were taken to the Board of Assessors for approval. So our target date was always May 1 to have all the county's properties approved by the Board of Assessors. About 2 weeks prior to that date, I was made aware that there was some difficulty in developing the residential models that are necessary to calculate those values. And it can get real technical here, but just in summary, in the mass appraisal technique or concept that we use, tables are designed that give values that each property can pull from. If this, value per square foot, values of garages, values of different components of the houses. And when the system assesses a property, it pulls from those tables for those values. So there were some difficulties in trying to establish the more complex aspects of the city. And in case you don't know it, we have a wide variety of property types, property values. It goes from both ends of the spectrum. We are completely unique, in my opinion, in that manner. But the complexities began with the land values for residential properties. And we broke the city up into 9 different neighborhoods, but really 4 quadrants, and tackled each quadrant at one time. And the first quadrant that came up, those complexities or difficulties in those accurate cost tables were found. And so all hands were on deck. Tyler Technologies had their best and brightest on the case, so to speak, and literally worked 7 days a week for weeks trying to debunk the model and make it work for all the properties in that first quadrant that we were analyzing. So instead of taking all the properties on May 1, we took the first quadrant to the board on May 1. And worked through a very long meeting, working through all those values for all the neighborhoods within that quadrant, that quarter of the city. Once we worked through that, okay, so now it's sound. The tables that are used to give the values of the separate components were established and approved. So then we went forward with the next quadrant, which included residential properties, commercial, and residential condominiums. That was May 8th. The first quadrant was that first residential quadrant and all commercial properties. So we took care of about half of it by May 8th. We took care of the remainder of the residential property. When I say take care, presented the values to the board on May 15th. And the last 2 remaining parcels found to be the most complex, and you could probably guess one of them, if not both of them. The Green Island community was extremely complex, and I can get into that if you want me to. And then the new development that is Old Town. And the values within that development were also very complex. Difficult for a model to say, here it is, this is exactly what it looks like, this is exactly what the values are in that area. Now model, go ahead and query the tables and apply the values. You just take Green Island, for example, and the various impacts on value to a property. Water view, what kind of water view? How much water frontage? Topography. A golf course view, what golf course view? So there, all these different pieces and parts had to be taken into account and applied to every parcel. it's not just an acre's worth this in Green Island, therefore 1.5 acres is worth 150% of that. There are situations where 1.5 acres is not worth what a half acre is in Green Island. So a lot of complexities that kind of break a model, if you will. And so that was the last group that was presented. That was the 22nd of May. So instead of 1 May, all properties are approved by the board. We're at 22 May, all properties approved by the board. At that time, it gets even more complex, if you will. We had 3 versions of a database running at the same time. We had the revaluation database, which is where Steve Wise worked, the manager of the revaluation project. We had the development database where Mary and her team was actually taking what we converted and dropping it in not only to the reval database, but the development database. Then we had the production database, which is what we operate with now. At the end of May 22, when all those values were approved, Mary's team had to take what was the reval database and drop it into production database. It sounds simple enough. But as soon as you do that with 70,000 parcels involved and the complexities that exist, there were outliers generated. And for the last 3 weeks, we've been working through the outliers, the multiple lists of hundreds of properties per tab, per spreadsheet, going through and working out the discrepancies. What we had is not showing up in what is. Why is that? Let's find the problem. Let's fix it. So Mary and Tyler Technologies anticipated about 3 weeks to go through that period of making sure every aspect of the conversion is correct. And again, this is all so we don't send out a faulty notice. That's the last thing we want to do. That's the reason why we didn't just get everything approved on May 1, and it took 3 weeks to May 22 to get everything approved by the board. That's the reason why after May 22, we didn't just drop it in production and print notices and send them, because there's a lot that could go wrong. And as I talked to you over a year ago, one of my main goals is accuracy. We don't want to send inaccurate notices out. Talk about hundreds and thousands of appeals. It would be very detrimental to our system and what we do to send out faulty notices. So all this has been an attempt to make it completely accurate. And Mary's here. I brought her on board in case you had questions about the conversion itself. But from May 22 to now, it's about 3 weeks. When we got pushed from May 1 to May 22, that pushed the project about 3 weeks. So that's where we are. That delay is what you see in the proposed timeline. It's caused by what I just described.
If I could, follow-up question.
Yes.
I guess, what I heard you talk about the property valuation changes.
Yes.
So there's a new formula for evaluating properties in this system than was in the old system?
It's not necessarily a new formula. It's mass appraisal techniques.
New criteria.
New software.
New criteria for a simple-minded person that doesn't understand technical
Yes, sir.
stuff.
And I get where you're coming from, and I'm trying to make sure I answer your question correctly. It's a new way of doing things.
So it's different than the way we used to do it?
Just because of the software and the capability of the software and everything that's built into it, yes. Criteria, I guess loosely you could say there's a new criteria for how we value the aspects of the components of the house or the commercial property, but it's still mass appraising.
Well, one thing that kind of piqued my interest was when you said waterfront view.
Yes.
I have a waterfront view in the winter. But so it just depends on what how you look at it. So the other thing that concerns me is the confidence you have in the program going forward.
I am completely confident.
The valuations of
Yes,
the
sir.
property.
That's why we've taken the time we've taken.
The other thing that concerns me is where we used to receive a certain portion of our tax revenue in October, we probably won't receive that. And and we won't receive it until December, which gives us a great time span on revenue. And it could put the city in a tough situation, and the ability to pay our bills. And I'm concerned that the vendor, and I don't mean to be critical, but we are where we are. The vendor should have worked 24 hours a day with their best team to get this done so we could be sending things out by June 1. That's just my opinion, one counselor. I'd like to hear why we didn't do that.
I do know that they had their best people almost 24 hours a day. They did sleep each day, but they were 7 days a week for, I know, 3 weeks from the time we identified the initial problem with the first quadrant, cost tables, land allocation that I described earlier. And they worked through that, from my perspective, very diligently and lots of hours to get it completed by the 22nd. From the 22nd to June 1st, 1 week, roughly, that was not enough time for them to take the revaluation database and put it into production and then work out all those kinks. We anticipated 3 weeks to do that. We're right at 3 weeks now. And my assumption is we'll be complete this week with that. So her 3-week anticipation, if you will, 3 to 4 weeks is what it's appearing like it'll be. But again, that initial delay started in May and pushed us back to where we are. I'm with you. I'm not trying to disparage or attack anyone. I do believe they did the best work that they could do under the situation that was at hand.
I'm assuming there was overtime involved in that process?
As far as how it impacts the cost of the project, no, sir, not to my knowledge.
So the city's not going to be sent a bill
No,
for that?
Not to my knowledge.
That's good. Mr. City Manager, I would like for council to be briefed on the new system as we heard today. There are different criteria so we can better communicate to the public what criteria they're looking at so we can answer questions that may come. I hope we don't get to the past 8% appeals, but
if we do, we do. We'll probably know that before the 45th day. Typically, most people go ahead and file those appeals early, the exception being the commercial representatives. They tend to wait till the last hour for some reason. And so it takes about a week after that 45-day period for us to process all those last day applications that always come. But we'll know well before the 45th day if we see us bumping that 5,600 mark. That will be very obvious, I hope, early on.
Thank you, Mayor.
And Mayor Pro Tem, if I may, Councilor Allen, when this was brought to my attention yesterday, one of the first concerns was cash flow for city, and so you're right on point. And with that, I asked them to work. We met about, I got to call it lunchtime yesterday to bring this to my attention, and I called an immediate meeting, and we met at 2:30 yesterday with all parties, and I see the tax commissioner here, and hopefully she will have some comments. And so I had them to put together at least this timeline to present to you today, but also I asked our finance director to be prepared to share with you the unintended consequence of this that will impact cash flow and how we operate between October, when we normally would expect to get the first payment from citizens, and citizens can still pay, of course, but if they don't pay by October 1st, there is no penalty, but it poses a situation for us that we're going to share with you when they're done.
Let me ask one more question. It puts all of us in an awkward situation. I mean, all of us and the tax commissioner as well. I mean, we have to respond when questions come up, but to Counselor Thomas's question, the escrow situation, the banks could pay, as they normally do, a payment in October and a payment. They could still do that.
Yes, sir, that was my question to someone in the tax commissioner's office. From my observation as a homeowner, they do that automatically, and they're very keen to alert me on the dollar or two that's under or over the allotted balance, but that seems to be an automatic process.
Okay.
And he told me that they communicate with the lenders, the banks, and give them that information electronically. They said tape, but electronically. So they will have that notification at the same time they would normally have that bill to pay by October 1. So my anticipation is that they'll communicate that. The tax commissioner's office will communicate with the lenders, as I told Ms. Thomas.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
We can hit Tax Commissioner Howe.
Good morning.
and if I may, before she says anything, I'd like to say that we had a good meeting yesterday with the tax commissioner, and this was not caused by the tax commissioner. It's not driven by the tax commissioner. She's just trying to help us fix it. And of course, you know, we have the tax assessor and the tax assessor board, and that's where all of the control is. It's not controlled by me, it's not controlled by the mayor, it's not controlled by the tax commissioner. And so she's here to help. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, we're all one team. So what questions can I try to answer for you?
I guess the biggest question, Councilor Allen, you want to ask your question about what are we going to do about notifying the public?
I'm
Yes, ma'am.
sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I was trying to, my concern was when the notices go out in October, John Doe Columbusite receives their bill, and they'll probably do like I do normally, is tack it on the refrigerator and put a reminder up there. They won't understand that there's no longer two dates that you pay, 60/40 kind of thing. So could we put a notice in there to kind of educate them on that type?
I think if I understand you correctly, what means of communications are we going to use to communicate to our customers, our taxpayers, as to the change for 2017? We've been brainstorming on that, and one of the things that we are going to use is that we will be using a bright-colored insert to do an explanation of what's occurring at this point in time for each tax bill that goes out. That's one means we're going to use. We are going to inundate them with the CCG TV station running announcements concerning what's happening. We're going to do an interview with them. We're going to appeal to the news media, all forms of news media, to get the information out there that there is a change and try to explain that to them. We're also going to turn to various organizations out there that might be listening in right now, that if they would like for us to come to their organization and give them some background information on what has occurred here, we will be willing to do that. And we're open to utilize any other form of communication out there that you might think of that would help us get that message out. I know for sure we're going to have some busy phones. If you think that we only have one operator to answer the phones, okay, it's going to be rough for us. But we're going to use the website for the tax assessors, for us, for CCG's website, everything possible that we feel we can do. And we'll be working with the city manager's office, anything. So any citizens within the hearing of my voice, I'm pleading to you, hey, we've got a situation that we would like your help with in trying to get the message out that the deadline for 2017, if this is passed, for paying your taxes will be December 1. However, we will accept payment prior to that time. So as soon as you get your bill, which will be by October 1, you can make payment at that time. You can pay 40% at that time, or you can pay 60% at that time, you can pay 50% at that time, or you can pay 100% of it at that time. And we will be able, thanks to Tyler again, to be able to take those partial payments as we will consider them. And no one will be penalized for paying it prior to that time, thinking that you've got to have it in by October 1. As far as the mortgage companies are concerned that you were referring to, we will send them letters explaining what's occurring. We have about 5 or 6 major mortgage companies that we communicate to. We do send them their bills by tape. We do have about 3 of those, though, that wait to the last minute to pay, okay? So whether or not they will pay early or not, which would really help you out cash flow-wise, I don't know. But we will draft a letter to each one of them and make sure that they get letters. Okay, so that's how we will notify them.
I know you have a shortage in your office already of staffing, and you're doing everything you can to keep everything up to date. Is there any way, see, I think one of the concerns is if they don't find out until October 1st that they have to December 1st to pay. We normally get our tax notices when?
You would get them about August 1, August 2nd.
Is there any way, and it may cost us some money, is there any way we could send out a notice, some kind of notice to the taxpayer telling them that their official tax notice will not be received until October? If we could send that out in August, but if they want to pay some, they can.
Let me ask something of the tax assessors. Could we not do an insert on your 45-day notice? Would the state allow us to do that, to put an insert in there stating that the tax bills will be forthcoming October 1 rather than August 1? Do you think they would allow us to do that? That's a possibility. We could do that. That would get it to them about, all right, what happens with the OTNs, the official tax notice that they were referring to earlier, the tax assessors that has to be sent out, and that's a 45-day wait time on it. Right now, you're shooting for June 30th, is that correct? On June 30th, that notice would go out. The taxpayers will receive, stating that you have 45 days to appeal the assessment that's listed on your tax notice, right? What we could do is put a color-coded insert in there with that tax notice that says for 2017, there will only be one installment at December 1. We can word it and insert it at that time, make it nice and large, and that's their first notification. We could do that.
That's a good idea.
I think that is a wonderful solution.
And again, Mayor Pro Tem, and Commissioner, I don't know if you were here when I said it, but I do intend to convene the same group we had yesterday and outline the strategy for communicating this information to the public, and then we'll update council on exactly what we're going to be doing at next week's council meeting.
Sounds great.
I wanted to help relieve the possible call volume to the commissioner's office. Could we somehow link in 311 so that when she gets to a point where there's an overflow, that those calls will be forwarded over to maybe 311, and then those operators will be ready to respond to the...
Well, and what I'd like to do is...
To the easy questions, maybe, and then
is talk to her about how we can help. So I will have that conversation with her.
We'll work it out.
Whether it be 311 or some other form of help,
whatever.
We'll work it out.
Councilor Woodson.
Ms. Hoff, thank you very much, and Ms. Betty for that teamwork. I really appreciate it because I'm kind of worried myself. But I have a question out of curiosity. Like myself, my taxes are paid by my mortgage to financial individuals. I don't pay the taxes. It's done in my payment. do those companies also get notified? How do they know?
Right, when I mentioned earlier that the mortgage companies will be notified, that is your mortgage company that I'm referring to, okay? Those mortgage companies today, their bill is in the form of a tape. It's electronic, okay? We send them a tape of everyone who has their payments, like yourself. Your name is listed on there with the partial number, okay? And then they run it against their system based on what's out there, and they'll send us a payment based on that, okay?
Okay.
So that's how they will be notified. Anyone out there that's hearing this, don't worry about your mortgage companies, okay? We will take care of them. They will be notified. They will know when to make payment in the same manner that we're saying here today. So they will be notified.
Thank you, I just got relief.
Well, definitely. We're going to...
And I'm pretty sure there are many others out there that were probably thinking the same thing I was. You know, how does my mortgage company, who's not in this area, is going to know of the changes that are happening here?
Absolutely. I'm glad this is being televised. It will help somewhat in trying to explain what has occurred here. It's an unusual situation. This is not something that is routine. You don't find this kind of thing happening, but when you have new systems being implemented, and this is a tremendous exercise, so there are going to be hiccups. And I am very, very pleased that we have Tyler on board, and they've done an exceptional job in working with the tax assessor's office as well as the tax commissioner's office. And I'm excited when all of this is automated in our office that we can do this, because for the citizens, you will be able to go online for us when it goes live for us at that point in time and actually make your payments online, okay? And we're working now to do that long-awaited step to make things easier for the taxpayers and not having to come in. We hope for 2017, you'll be able to use credit cards. Okay.
I have one more question or a suggestion. Could we make those inserts as simple as possible?
Absolutely.
Because I've seen inserts where they're trying to explain to you something, and you have to read all this technology, all this technical stuff, way, and then at the end, and with busy lives and kids screaming and the stove cooking, you just say, oh, yeah, whatever, I'll read it later, and you don't. I would like to see it, you know, right in the
Big,
beginning.
bold, and simple.
Here's the new thing, on this day, blank, on this day,
The
blank,
KISS
blank.
principle, right?
Correct. Thank
do
you.
it.
And that's not to offend anybody, it's just that we live such a busy life, and there's so much details going on, we'll just glance at it and throw it to the side and miss the whole point.
Yep. We know our audience, we will do it for you.
Mayor Pro Tem, just a couple of other points I'd like to make. After we had our meeting yesterday at 2:30, I asked the tax assessor's office to contact the superintendent of education because this impacts them as well, the cash flow concern. And wanted them to schedule a meeting with him prior to this council meeting to share what we're dealing with. I know that he attempted, and I think that maybe the superintendent is out of town or that could not be worked out, and so he was going to send an email to the superintendent to share the conversation that was going to be had here at council meeting this morning on this matter. And I wanted them to share with them that we will maybe pull the discussion from this meeting and send him a link that he could then send to school board members in the event they did not watch city council and wanted to benefit from this discussion. And so I believe you've sent the email this morning, and then we'll be available at perhaps the next school board meeting to answer any questions and give them a forum or session like what you've had here today, because really about 60% of our property tax collections go to the school district. We get roughly about 40%. So they need to have this conversation because if it's a cash flow concern for us, it probably will be for them. And so I wanted you to know that. And then before people, conversations start going around, I want them to understand the structure. The tax assessor reports to a tax assessor board. That tax assessor board does not report to the mayor. A tax assessor board does not report to the city manager. You just need to know the structure. And so they are here today to make a report to council. And they will make a report to the school district, and all taxes will be collected instead of a portion, 40% or so October 1st, and 60% on December 1st. It will all be due December 1st, and if not paid by December 1st, appropriate penalties will be assessed thereafter. But people can pay, as the tax commissioner stated, you can pay 50% in October, or you can pay 100%. You can pay 60% in October, or you can pay 100%. And so those who are accustomed to paying October 1st, you can still do that. And we hope you will. And that way, you don't pay the full load December 1st. So continue business as usual. It's just not mandated, and there's no penalty for October 1st. And so we hope citizens will do business as usual. It's voluntary, but it's not voluntary after December 1st. And so I wanted to make that clear, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I see none.
All right. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, we will bring that millage ordinance back next week for a vote. It will include the due date of December 1 for all property tax payments. The next item we have is the levy of the millage for the Muskogee County School District. That language about December 1 payments is also contained in this ordinance. Taxpayers can pay early if they desire, but the due date will be December 1.
Okay, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, my finance director just reminded me, we need to talk to you about cash flow. I told you the finance director would come up, and so I'm sorry, Mr. City Attorney, but we'd like to have that brief discussion or share with you what that means.
Okay.
Good morning again. So as the city manager mentioned, cash flow for us this puts us in a tough position here. You know, about 31% of our operating budget is property taxes. So that's a third of the budget, a third of the revenue that we intend to collect is from property taxes. And so, well, with the city foregoing one installment payment, that payment that would be typically due the 1st of October, we're going to require that all departments delay any purchases unless they're absolutely necessary. I mean, this doesn't mean that we're not going to pay bills as they come due for those bills that are due, but particularly these large ticket items, these capital purchases within the FY18 operating budget. We've allocated about $5 million for capital outlay. We're going to delay those purchases until January of 2018 to assist us with some of the cash flow issues that may come about. And what I'll also do as part of the monthly finance update is just keep council abreast on the cash position for the city, so that you'll know on a monthly basis where we stand as far as the cash is concerned. And typically, at some point, even prior to the 1st of October, the tax commissioner is very gracious in giving us advances. So if people feel the need to continue their practices as usual and make part of their payments in October. Hopefully, we'll see some sort of advance from the tax commissioner's office to assist us with cash flow until the tax bills are due as of December 1st. So.
And of course, if we see that people are doing business as usual, paying a portion after October 1st, and the cash is there in the usual way, then we'll move capital purchases in a normal way. But if we don't see that that's the case, of course, it will be, of course, payments are due in full in December. It would be after December, and we know that we're in the holiday season, and so it likely be January. But everything that has been approved in the budget will be done. But there's a 60-day delay, if you will, between October 1st and December 1st. And so we're talking about 60 days difference, and we believe that we can work that.
Okay, I see no questions. Thank you. The city attorney.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, we will again call item 15 on first reading, which is the public school millage ordinance, which has the same issues we've already been discussing, and it will be back for a vote next week at 5:30. And then our final item for first reading today is an ordinance amending the Columbus, Georgia pension plan for general government employees, the disability income plan, and the death benefit plan to provide that no employees hired or rehired by the Hospital Authority of Columbus on or after July 1, 2017 may be eligible members of the plans. And this was a request that came to us from the Hospital Authority. You have their request, as well as the pension board has reviewed the request and passed a resolution. Basically, they do not find that this request to not have new employees coming into the plan would adversely impact the rest of our pension plan. And I believe we have some folks from the Hospital Authority here to address council on the subject. Rick or Britt, I don't know which one of you want to start first.
I guess I'll start. I'm Rick Alabozek, the CFO for the Hospital Authority, and Britt Hayes, our Vice President. As Lucy indicated, we made a request back in March to the Pension Board that our new hires effective July 1st, 2017 be excluded from the pension plan. The primary reason for that is we, as a healthcare provider, are having a very difficult time attracting our certified nursing assistants, and to a lesser extent, our licensed practical nurses and housekeeping staff, primarily due to the 8% contribution that they are required to make into the pension plan. We have people going part-time to avoid being in the plan, thereby foregoing other benefits. So we are hopeful that this will allow us to attract what we consider to be the backbone of our workforce. We have certified nursing assistants, or CNAs, are probably about a third of our workforce. And then the housekeeping staff is a little bit less than that. But that's where we are coming from, and we just ask your consideration of this. And if anybody has any questions.
I see no questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank y'all for being here. We'll vote on that next week, 5:30 meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, the last item listed on our agenda is a resolution to settle the Recorder's Court case of King and Wright versus Columbus. This has been discussed with council and their lawyers. This settlement total is $20,000. This was the second case involving Recorder's Court again, and it's ready for adoption.
It has been properly moved and second. I see no questions. And the vote.
Okay. That does pass, Mayor Pro Tem, that's all we had listed.
Okay. Just a minute. Councilor Garrett.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem and Mr. City Attorney, as a point of personal privilege, I know the majority of this room is here for the Leonard Street closing discussion. I was going to see if we could go ahead and bring that forward so those folks could leave, and that may also eliminate somebody from the public agenda if she wants to, if we can go and have everybody speak on the topic once the Director Newman speaks.
That's fine. It's the pleasure of council. I know City Manager has an update on this matter. You may want to bring it up now and then let whoever wanted to speak on the public agenda.
Which item?
We're talking about
You-
You know, the Leonard Street?
This has to do with Leonard Street, that's the question.
Okay, can we, we're going to the public agenda now, and we only have two people on the public agenda. One of them is Leonard Street. So if we can do Miss Amin, and then we can do Leonard Street.
Just take them in order, and then second item on public agenda, everybody can be heard. Ms. Newman and Ms. Powell.
Okay. We're now on the public agenda, and I call for Ms. Teresa L. Amin.
There should be 22 copies of each of the two documents.
And if you will state your name for the records and your address, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Teresa L. Amin, 3911 Steam Mill Road here in Columbus. I'm coming before council to ask your support for the grant application that you will be voting on, I believe, on the 20th. The grant application through the Crime Prevention Department was for $22,000. I've learned from the director that the advisory board is recommending only $13,000. And as Ms. Thomas heard me say last night at the school board meeting, this is the one and only time the Southern Anti-Racism Network will come before council to request money from the Crime Prevention Department. What I learned last week from the director of Georgia Appleseed, the nonprofit organization that has received tens of thousands of dollars here, is that they will no longer be operating in Columbus, Muskogee County. Now, I mention that because Georgia Appleseed and the Southern Anti-Racism Network have the same purpose, working with the school district to close the school-to-prison pipeline. That is fundamentally what the SPICE program is about, strong parental involvement in community education. And I'd like to say a special thank you to Brittany in the Clerk of Council's office for helping me set up my presentation today, because there's a 5-minute video which I would like to roll now, which tells about the SPICE program, which ran in Durham, North Carolina for several years, powering up hundreds of families to close the school-to-prison pipeline. So if the folks who are in charge of the video could run that video now, I would really appreciate it.
The reason why I joined the program was because I heard it was a way to kind of help my daughter as far as her schooling and improve her reading.
Carol Smith, a resident of Durham's Cornwallis housing development, speaks of SPICE, strong parental involvement in community education, a computer and literacy program that helps black parents help their kids close the achievement gap. And Carol says her daughter needed the help.
When she entered school last year, she was not on reading level, and she was in jeopardy of repeating the 3rd grade. And so I wanted Julia to know how much I thought her education was important. And this was a time where the two of us could spend time together alone, because I have another child as well.
play, eating. Through the SPICE program, Carol and Julia met once a week for 6 weeks with other community mothers and their children in a local rec center's computer lab. There, the women and children were taught reading and computer skills that Program Director Teresa Elamine says help bridge a variety of gaps.
It's building a real community, and people say, you know, it's helping us to know each other better in terms of neighbors and support each other better.
But the biggest gaps bridged by the SPICE program are the achievement gap and the digital divide, says Elamine. She began the program in response to Durham schools' reported 30% gap between black and white student achievement.
The really striking thing about SPICE and how we're focusing it is something that the superintendent said at a meeting one day, that the achievement gap is widest when they enter school. And so if children aren't reading by third grade, it just continues to widen and widen. And so we said, well, let's start with them when they're youngest. And so the SPICE program really targets children in the age group 4 to 9.
Frank Smith is a 7-year-old who, along with his mom Tara, graduated from the SPICE program's second class. Tara says besides a chance to have one-on-one time with Frank, the class helped her son improve in school.
Wonderful, because when he first started, because to be honest, he's repeating first grade, because I didn't think he was advanced enough to go to the second grade, but now, and just like the middle of the year, and I'm ready to tell him, yeah, put him in the second grade, because he knows, really he knows more about the computer than I do.
And Frank seems to feel good about completing the SPICE class.
Good, very good, because at first I didn't know how to work the computer, and when I took an AI test, I had to have the teacher by me so she could help me.
But now you don't need the teacher?
No.
As a result of the SPICE program's focus on reading, it has won some major fans. The program not only boasts numerous volunteers, but has attracted major corporate support as well.
And when we heard about this particular program where they were working with parents and their kids to help improve reading, we saw that as obviously a great program that will help with the overall goal of raising reading levels, which in turn will help close the achievement gap.
Murphy, with the help of several nonprofit organizations, provided SPICE program director Elamine with 12 computers. She in turn awarded a computer to each of the program's graduates, gifts that Elamine says have really changed lives.
Parents feeling more motivated, feeling more confident about teaching their children to read, and feeling more empowered by having computers in their homes and how it's changing their whole family life. So often when I visit some parents, I see them gathered around the computer instead of the TV. And that is really a beautiful sight to see them all. Well, it's my turn to get on the computer. And so that's very important.
Woo! I could not afford a computer. And so to get a computer and to know that I had the opportunity to not only just work on a computer and work with Julia, but to finish what I started here in the class was an enjoyment. I couldn't wait to get it home, to plug it up. Now that you have your computers.
Carol, who graduated with daughter Julia from the first SPICE class, now comes back to teach for the program. In fact, Carol, along with another SPICE graduate, Sharon Nelson, taught Tara Smith and her son Frank. Nelson says she came back to teach because she wanted to help other people the way she was helped.
But what made me proudest was working with the kids and their parents, seeing the parents interact with their kids, and seeing that the parents can actually come out and ask somebody for help. Because the kids were fine.
And program director Elamine says that the success of the program lies with the parents.
The parents are really the first teachers of their own children. So even though parents have some literacy issues, I'm just amazed at watching, in some cases, the parents kind of learning along with their children. And the fact that we're using the computers as a part of this, the parents are developing skills that help them in other ways, like in terms of jobs. So it's really a very much a connection and a unity between the parents and the children, improving their literacy. Voting on the 20th on all of the 29 or 30 grants that will be before you. And it's my understanding that the advisory board made significant cuts, and all of us who were notified that we were approved for funding by the advisory board. But I stress again, this is a seed grant. I have a call in to the mayor now for a special meeting with her to talk about how we're going to raise millions of dollars, because this program is funded significantly by the community. In Durham, North Carolina, the Mary Reynolds Babcock Foundation gave over $70,000 over a period of 3 years in order for me to work myself out of the job of director so that I could turn it over to the parents. And I can tell you, in my 52 years of organizing, from the age of 17 at Tuskegee with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, this is the best thing I've ever done in my life. And I wanted to come to this town. Thank you.
Ms. Alameen, thank you. Now, how do you want to proceed with this, Mr. City Manager? We have on the public agenda, Ms. Brinkley Pound.
Yes, ma'am. I think we should hear from Ms. Brinkley Pound, and then we'll call Director of Engineering Donna Newman up, who's on my agenda, to provide an update on Leonard Street.
Okay. Ms. Pound. And if you would give your name and address, please.
Brinkley Pound, 1916 Leonard Street. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you concerning the proposed construction plans of St. Paul United Methodist Church on Wildwood Avenue. My name is Brinkley Pound and my address is 1916 Leonard Street. The church surrounds several neighborhoods under the control of the Board of Historical and Architectural Review, but the church itself is not. In addition, the church is not subject to the oversight of the zoning or planning commissions. As Rick Jones, Director of Planning for Columbus, stated at the May 8th public meeting regarding the closure of Leonard Street, St. Paul can go pretty much where they want to, and there's not a whole lot they have to do to continue with their proposed plans. This public forum is the only opportunity for anyone in the neighborhood surrounding St. Paul Church to speak to their construction plans, which include the closing of Leonard Street between Forest and Wildwood Avenues, the demolition of 2 homes, and the construction of 1 more parking lot. I will use my time here to explore the overall issues of this construction plan, which Ryan Clements, along with Will Clyott, Tim Farmer, Will Barnes, and Philip Thayer, presented to City Council on April the 11th. Thank you for listening to my concerns. I object to the demolition of perfectly habitable homes in one of Columbus's most established and diverse neighborhoods. The school district recently demolished this house for more parking. The church has already demolished this house and intends to demolish this home and this home, all for parking lots. I object to the destruction of mature canopy trees that are home to creatures of all kinds in our neighborhood. I object to the laying down of more asphalt in our neighborhood for parking lots. It is not necessary, nor is it appropriate. I object to the adding of more paved surfaces that will exacerbate the ongoing flooding issues at Lake Bottom Park, as there is not sufficient mitigation protocols in St. Paul's proposed plans. At present, the church has over 75 off-street parking lot spaces, along with Sunday access to the multitude of on-street parking spaces on adjacent roadways, and they have access to over 300 spaces at Columbus High School. Since the request to close Leonard Street was made known to the neighborhood in March, we've gathered data on the use of their current parking spaces. They do not currently use what they have. On average, there are 20 vacant spaces in the Leonard Street lot and many vacant on-street spaces available on Sundays. Per the Unified Development Ordinance Code, Chapter 4, Article 3, Section 4.3.1 and 4, the location of required parking should reduce the number of entrances and exits to public roadways as well as reduce the number of vehicles entering or exiting public roads and streets. At present, there's one entrance from Leonard Street to the back lot at St. Paul, an entrance to the chapel lot, and one entrance to an unpaved lot. The closure of Leonard Street and the acceptance of their parking lot design will create 2 more exits on Wildwood, an exit on Girard, and an exit on 21st Street. In addition, as I have indicated to the Chief of Police and the Fire Chief, the proposed construction plan would move the access point of their dumpster to Forest Avenue, thereby blocking this roadway and interfering with the traffic flow and with public safety access. Finally, this portion of Leonard Street is an arterial road designed to provide the highest level of service between 2 major avenues, Wildwood and Forest, as the only 2-way street between Girard and 17th, serving for the safety of the neighborhood and the access of emergency vehicles, over 100 residents, as well as Columbus High School students and St. Paul members. The proposed construction plan will increase the surface parking at St. Paul by over 200% and will create more than 500 parking lot spaces in the non-commercial block bordered by 17th, Cherokee, Forest, and Wildwood Avenues. Aaron Ben Joseph, an urban studies and planning professor from MIT and author of the book Rethinking the Lot, The Design and Culture of Parking, found that there are at least 4 1/2 parking spaces for every vehicle in the United States. That is over 800 million parking spaces. This does not include garages, driveways, and street parking. He also found that as much as 35% of cities are covered in surface lots, which account for 70% of the parking space supply. Environmentally, he says, paving over huge swaths of land is not a very good idea. Today's culture is becoming more urban, that is, more people on foot or bikes or using mass transit, which lessens the parking demand. Our city code provides a remedy for the overbuilding of surface parking lots in the Columbus UDO Article 3, Section 4.3.12, which states that the council may, as a part of the approval of a new or expanded use, new construction, substantial renovation or alteration or expansion of an existing site, approve the use of shared parking to reduce the overall parking requirements. The basis for such an application is to establish shared parking for complementary uses, such as the use of a building or structure, and in this case, existing parking lots at Columbus High School, for 2 or more usage which possess complementary rather than competing peak hours of usage. As such is the case here. I urge council to exercise their right by ordinance to protect and preserve our neighborhoods so that this residential area remains safe for all residents and continues to be a walkable and bikeable neighborhood with complete street access. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fallon.
And
City Manager.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, we'll hear from our Director of Engineering, Ms. Donna Newman. And of course, I see that there are a number of people in the audience. I don't know if they are for or against this, but I presume they are one or the other. And so I'm going to have her to come and share with us.
And let me
Leonard
say this,
Street.
that finished our public agenda also.
Yes. Ms. Newman.
Yes. Good morning. Just for council's reference, in your informational section for this week, there was a draft resolution and a draft agenda report giving you some more information. Our intention is to bring this back for consideration at next council meeting, which will be next Tuesday. At April 11th, the St. Paul, representatives from St. Paul came forward and introduced to council their proposal to expand their church facilities. And part of that was the inclusion of Leonard Street, and I passed out, just for everybody else's reference, it's just a copy of their proposed site plan, so that you would have a visual of what they're proposing to do at this point in time. On May 8th, at council's request, we had a public meeting that was held here at the City Service Center, and received comments from the residents and members of the church that attended. And also, there was 50-plus people that attended that meeting. And then on May 15, we had received some concerns from the neighborhood, and we met in a home on Leonard Street with some of the neighborhoods members that had some concerns about the proposed closure. At council's request, I had the fire department, the police department, and based on some comments from the residents, I had the school district review their proposed site plan to see if there would be any concerns as far as response times, public safety, school traffic, and none of those three had any concerns. We also took some traffic counts out there. On average, we counted approximately 234 cars a day, and then about 217 on Saturday and 150 on Sunday. And so we had a proposal. I've been working with Councilor Garrett, and I'm sure he's going to comment shortly. But I had a proposal from St. Paul on some conditions that they thought they could live with that would address some of the issues from the neighborhood. And then I had responses from the neighborhood on some concerns that they had, and these are similar to some of the concerns that were expressed at these meetings that we had. And so I put together a draft, what I thought was a draft resolution for discussion purposes as a starting point, because this is somewhat of an unusual case. From a traffic standpoint, there's no real benefit for Leonard. The church owns both sides of the property. Now, I'm sure the neighborhood might argue that some of those utilize those streets and some of the students utilize the streets. But from just the traffic volume, there's no real need for that particular section of the street. So in my conversations, and I've had a lot of conversations over the last several weeks with a lot of people. This is a very passionate thing for the neighbors, and I understand that as well as the church. And even, I'll just note, even Midtown couldn't come to a consensus. They were kind of split as well on this particular project, if you will. And just so you'll know, for our, in your draft resolution, just general comments that I had, again, with members of the project team, I guess, from St. Paul yesterday. They are willing to meet with the neighbors on a routine basis just to keep them informed, but they're concerned about the control of the project and them maintaining. They do want to work with the neighbors and resolve some of their concerns. They did note that they no longer intend on relocating the dumpster. It's going to stay in its current location. That was a concern that was brought up from the neighbors. They are in process of trying to repair and replace the existing air cooler, which is one of the major concerns that we hear from the neighborhood, and we experienced it ourselves when we were at the meeting. We could hear it. They do commit to maintaining pedestrian access. They're going to leave it as part of their design, is that area will be open so that people that have used it in years past for walking will still be able to do that. Now, they did caution me that it's not necessarily going to be ADA compliant, and that's due to the existing grades of the area. Their site will be ADA compliant, but it's not going to be designed specifically for that purpose for the public to travel through there. But it'll be open where people can continue to walk through there. And then the lighting, there was a discussion about the lighting, and there is a regulation currently in the UDO that requires fixtures that cut off at the property line. That was put in the UDO in 2004 when it was adopted, so that is something that they will have to comply with, regardless if it's a condition of the resolution or not. As well as there was some concern about the hours of operation, and that too will have to comply with the noise ordinance. So that will be something that's regulated. I know there was some discussion about the number of parking. They have not submitted a parking study That will be part of the process. We'll review their existing and their proposed parking, and it'll have to comply with the UDO requirements as well. And stormwater, they'll have to comply with all the stormwater regulations for water quality and increase in runoff.
So, Mayor Pro Tem, I want to thank staff for getting in the middle of this and trying to bring back information that can help you make a decision on this matter. And we do have a draft resolution in your package today that we will have on my agenda next week. And we will be asking for a vote. And of course, I know that there are a lot of people out there, and we're done with the public agenda. And as I said, I don't know if you're here for or against. I just know you're here. But if you are, if you're against it, if you would just wave your hand, let me see who's here. If you're for it, raise your hand. Let me see. Okay, I'm just trying to be clear. And so we'll answer any questions that you have, but I think her report was pretty simple and clear. And so we will bring back a resolution next week. Mayor Pro Tem, the engineering director is here to answer any questions, if there are questions.
There was an email I got, and I was trying to find it.
Okay.
That there was, a lady had some concerns about some of the issues on Leonard Street. I can't remember her name.
I don't know either, but if you find it and you provide it to us, we'll see if we can address those issues or concerns.
Okay.
But if there are no questions, thank you, Director Newman, and we'll bring a resolution next week.
Okay, thank you.
Don't leave. Councilor Thomas.
Mr. City Manager, as I understand, what we will be requested to vote on next week is whether or not our only issue would be whether or not to declare Leonard Street surplus and therefore make it available for acquisition by the church. The other items that are in your report and in Ms. Pound's presentation are things that would typically and normally be addressed during the usual permitting of the construction. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, ma'am, that is a correct statement, and there has been lengthy conversations between my office and the city attorney's office. If council so wishes to add some conditions in the resolution as part of that street closure, then we can make those a condition of the permit, and then they're then enforceable if we make them a condition of the permit. Now, council can vote simply to abandon the street and declare it surplus, and then the city manager will dispose of it in accordance with normal city procedures and policies. And then they would be bound by what's normally in the UDO, which a lot of these conditions are, but there were some specific requests that the neighborhood had, such as opportunities for communication and being kept informed, and thus that was why there was a requirement for them to meet routinely with the neighborhood just to keep them up to date. I think there were some past concerns about the church making promises, and then the neighborhood didn't feel they were fulfilled, and there may have been reasons for that, I don't know. But we just wanted to make sure that if there were any conditions, that we had them in the resolution, and then we can make them part of the permit.
Well, one of my one of my concerns is that we typically have projects like this brought to you or to the engineering department or the planning department or whomever that never get to us because of the regulations that are already in place, and that you, in your capacity as the director of engineering, the engineering department, enforce. And so it's only those that particularly, I guess one of the things that I'm trying to remember is that typically the kinds of issues that we get where there are conditions applied are in zoning.
Yes, ma'am.
And not in construction pieces. I mean, as long as what the church is wanting to do meets those requirements, we, council, do not typically get involved in that. Is that the pattern?
Yes, ma'am, that is a true statement.
Well, I'm a little concerned that we may be setting a precedent here that we don't need to set. This is, Ms. Newman, your job. You know, so I don't know, Mr. City Manager, if I'm making myself clear. I just don't want us to go overboard, and yet I want us to protect the neighborhood.
Yes, ma'am.
I want us to work with the church and so forth, but our responsibility at this time as a council deals with Leonard Street.
Yes, ma'am.
And not with any of the other construction that may or may not go on that site.
That is correct. And if council so wishes, we will move forward and we will review it like we do any other project.
And as long as the church's project meets the requirements, even if there are new requirements that you've put on, such as meeting with the neighborhood, I'm not sure that's an issue that council needs to take an official position on.
So,
The official position is what is a little disconcerting to me, Mr. City Manager.
yeah, and let me just read the way the resolution is going to read, and then you'll have to tell me what's different, if anything.
We would just remove those conditions. It would just be the normal declaring it, abandoning the
Okay,
street, declaring
gotcha.
it surplus and
Okay.
disposal.
Because it reads at...
The conditions will just be taken out, but
Yes.
the resolution is still being tweaked, the language to conform with state law.
Okay, so, Counselor, that is exactly what we'll do.
Okay.
And so the wording in the resolution will be adjusted. I can tell you, we're going to do exactly that, and you're right. Because as it reads now, it's abandonment of Leonard Street, resolution deleting from the official map of Consolidated Government of Columbus, Georgia, the improved segment of Leonard Street between the east right-of-way on Forest Avenue and the west right-of-way land on Wildwood Avenue, declaring it surplus and authorizing its disposal in accordance with city code and under the conditions outlined in the approved resolution. So we will remove the conditions.
Correct.
And you simply would be voting on the other language.
And I want to, I hope, reassure some of the folks from the neighborhood that by our removing those from the official action of council does not mean that those conditions won't be met. But I think council gets involved in enough minutia without taking on more than we typically do. So that's my concern.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you. Thank you,
Councilor Garrett.
Director.
Councilor Thomas. Councilor Thomas, I certainly understand where you're coming from. I will say that the church has been very willing to, there are, I guess, conditions that are part of the resolution that they didn't necessarily want, and they've been very willing to do, and Ms. Pound has been very gracious in working with the church too and trying to get some things met that would at least make the neighborhood somewhat happy. And I mean, I do want to bring out, I mean, this is a compromise. Nobody is completely happy, and the church has been very willing. They're spending more money and agreed to spend more money than they need to necessarily. They could have an above-ground detention pond, which if you look at the plan design, I know the public can't see that, but there's one by the parking lot that they'll be required to put in, and that's going to cost them a significant amount more money to put it underground. So there's nothing visible. And I mean, there are conditions that, I know the neighbors have worked very hard with the church they have found some that they do agree on. I know the church will be clarifying those, but you know, that's the result of there've been a lot of public meetings I've gone to and a lot of private meetings, and I know that's kind of an unusual circumstance, but as long as it's something that everybody can agree to, I mean, I'd like to see them as part of the resolution if we can, but.
One of the issues I remember in the email, and you talked about earlier, about the sounding of the air conditioning and how it went on all day and all night. And what can we get them to do about that?
Yes, yes, ma'am. My understanding in conversations with the church is they are actively working on that. They are actively repairing and potentially replacing that existing system, as well as providing additional methods to, like a sound barrier, if you will, to reduce the noise from that particular unit.
Will that be made a part of the resolution?
Not the conditions. No, I think they will just agree that they're doing certain things.
Right.
The resolution, we're trying to keep council in the lane that council should probably be in, and the balance of that will come through.
So none of the conditions that have been brought out will be written down?
Well, I think they are in writing. The church has agreed to them in writing. They just you won't be voting on those because this is not an ordinance. It's a resolution.
When the property is made surplus, is it not put out for bid?
On streets, typically, it's...
Well, this is going to be an abandonment under state law of a street segment, so those provisions that you're talking about, a possible surplus sale with sealed bids, that won't come into play here. This is going to be an abandonment of a portion of a street by this council under state law.
Okay. I know when 4th Street came to council to try to do that down in front of that church, I thought it was said then that we would not be doing any more street abandonment for churches.
I'm sorry.
When we had that contested abandonment request from 4th Street,
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was said then that we would not be doing any more street abandonments.
Well, it's totally council's discretion whether you deem this in the public interest. Under the state law, you can abandon a portion of this street or any other street if you find it to be in the public interest.
Councilman Garrett.
Just to speak to that point, I wasn't on council when that decision was made, obviously, but I can tell you the project that has been presented is something that's the result of a lot of compromise, and There's a lot here that's a lot more expensive than it needs to be. And if we don't abandon Leonard Street, they don't have the project integrity, and the church can pretty much do what they want to, as was discussed earlier. I mean, churches have a lot of leeway, so we'll have a project that'll be piecemeal if we do not abandon Leonard Street, or we can have a project where the neighborhood has some input and the church is able to have a complete project. So I mean, I just want councilors to know that. I mean, if we don't abandon it, then we don't really have, there's no say from anybody on it. But right now, I mean, it's something that will flow together very well. And also, there's some safety concerns because there's going to be a youth building where the street is right now. It'll be across the street from it, so.
Thank you, Ms. Newman.
I see no more questions.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, I'm going to go into the city manager's agenda.
Okay.
No.
It's not a public hearing, it's just a public. Yeah. Madam Clerk, would you please put it to the record that I'll be abstaining from discussion and voting on this particular issue, on the Leonard Street issue?
Next week. Yeah. Mayor Pro Tem, I'm going to the first item on my agenda, and of course, funding was approved in the budget, but I'm going to have Deputy City Manager.
Excuse me, can we kind of have some quietness in the back? Thank you.
I'm going to have Deputy City Manager Hodge just make some points regarding the first item on my agenda, road improvement, safety, and alternative transportation projects in the amount of $9 million, and these are included in the budget that was just approved. Deputy City Manager Hodge.
Good morning, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. The items listed in this agenda report and resolution were approved as part of the FY18 budget. These were the projects that we are moving forward with in FY18 through various funding sources, either the OLOS, the T-SPOS discretionary, the Georgia Department of Transportation Z230 funds, or the paving fund. And this resolution will allow us to move forward with those components of the project that's not the construction. The construction contracts will come back to council for approval. This is right-of-way acquisition, easements, design services, and if we need to bid those out, they'll come back to council for your approval on design services related to the Z230 funds. Those are required to be bid out separate, but this will allow us to move forward with all of the projects that were listed in the FY18 budget for all preliminary requirements of the projects.
And so, Mayor Pro Tem, we are requesting council's approval to proceed with executing and funding the pre-construction requirements for road improvements, safety, and alternative transportation projects totaling $9,075,596.
It has been properly moved and second. Is there any way we can get that list that's in the documentation?
Yes, ma'am. We can. It can. You said post it.
If we can have it, some sort of public can see what roads we're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. And And so the roads, and I'll just go through them if you'd like.
Okay, please.
Boxwood Boulevard Bridge, $450,000. Brown Avenue, Casita Road, Andrews Road, that's a roundabout, $1.5 million. Casita Road, 23rd Avenue, North Lumpkin Road, $1.5 million. Melrose Drive Bridge, $700,000. Decatur Street Bridge, $600,000. Benning Drive Bridge, $800,000. Sidewalks, Americans Disability Act, $100,000. Traffic Common, $100,000. Guardrails, $100,000. Riverwalk, City Mills Parking, $250,000. Riverwalk, Westville Parking, $250,000. Resurfacing, $2.5 million. Park ADA upgrades, $100,000. Fiber interconnect, $100,000. Total $9,075,596.
Okay, thank you. Got some questions. Councilman Thomas.
Ms. Hodge, the traffic traffic calming that was on there, is that to fund some of the tables or?
Those would be traffic calming that's already gone through the process. As you know, we've eliminated the traffic calming program from the engineering department several years ago through the budget process. So these would be those that had been approved previously, but there was no funding allocated. But yes, that would be speed tables and those types of things for those that are already on the list and were already approved for traffic calming devices.
And there was one that you had up there that was the paving that was from 3 different sources.
Yes, the resurfacing paving are from 3 different sources. We allocate funding from T-SPLOST discretionary, the paving fund, as well as the OLOST.
And I know that I have had some questions about why aren't we using more OLOST money for paving. As I recall, when we first did the OLOST, we were told that we have something like 1,000 miles of road, streets in Columbus that the city is responsible for, and we should be paving about 50 miles a year in order to keep them all up to date. And we are not doing that because we don't have the finances to do that. Do you have any idea of what kind of, how many miles this $2.5 million will pay? I know that at one time we were told that we weren't paving but about, I think it was like 12 miles a year, and we ought to be paving like 50 miles a year. But I'm just wondering what kind of impact this $2.5 million is going to have on.
It's about 15.
Our goal is to do about 15 miles a year. Obviously, we would love to do 50. It's kind of difficult to say because depending on the roads, some roads require milling and resurfacing, which is more, and others require just regular resurfacing. So we try to develop 2 contracts, if you will, and maximize our dollars that we get each year as funding.
And our source of funding for that are primarily these 3?
Yes, ma'am.
These 3 sources?
Yes, ma'am.
Whatever we can do to increase that, I'm sure that you're taking a look at it, but if we have 1,000 miles of street in the city and we're only repaving 15 a year, it's going to take us a while.
Yes, ma'am.
And typically, it's the streets that I drive on that we are not repaving, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. City Manager, I'm just kind of looking at this, I guess this is a measure of management coming out of coming out of your office. Have we done it like this before?
Yes, we did it last year.
Coming to us?
Yes, sir.
Last 2 years.
We remember last year we did, I think it was 16 million that you approved in one list that we had included in the budget. I believe it was last 2 years, yes.
This is, if I'm reading this right, it kind of somewhat says this is all pre-construction requirements.
Yes.
So we're really not talking about construction.
No,
That will be a whole separate issue.
And those things are going to come back to you. This is just to allow us to proceed forward with it.
Okay.
But it'll come, every project will come back to this council.
That's right. With the approval of the contract for each one of the construction items, it will come back to council for approval, because it would be over the $10,000.
Well, and I have to ask this question. I'm just going to ask it. Does it seem strange to you that we would publish or recognize the amount of money that we're approving?
No, sir.
It does?
In
You comfortable with that?
In government, unfortunately, it's public information.
Well, I know, but I'm just talking about from a competitive standpoint out in the market.
Well, I mean, it can be good and bad, and I know we've had this conversation before, and those who are most competitive, because it's going to be a competitive process, will get it. If someone says, oh, they got $100,000, I'm going to try and get all of it, then someone's going to say, and so the quantity is going to, work is going to play into that. And so it depends on, you might get all $100,000, but it depends on how much are we going to get from you versus the other, and with same quality and difference.
And last question here is, what are we talking about fiber interconnect? What exactly do you mean by that?
That is putting all of our traffic signals so that we can manage those from the office without having to go to the location. So we've had the major streets done, and we're adding signals to those.
Okay, I got it. And then we will, as these items are completed at a later date, you'll come back with request to move forward with construction.
That's right.
Thank you, sir.
And I would say all of these items have been discussed recently at council.
Yeah, we have.
Yes.
You're right. That's
right.
One of the reasons I asked.
Yes.
We seem to be taking steps. It seems like a new process to me, but that's okay.
Well, yeah, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see no more questions. We have a motion and a second to approve. The voting can take place.
Mayor Pro Tem, next, I've got environmental service agreement between Columbus Power Producers Limited Liability Corp. And Columbus Consolidated Government. You may remember we came to you in February of this year, and you approved allowing us to move forward with Enerdan Power Systems to investigate the possibilities of for the beneficial use of existing landfill gas from Pine Grove and from Chautauqua Road, and they proceeded forward with that, and now we are coming back to you asking your approval to enter a contract with Columbus Power Producers to develop beneficial uses for landfill gas produced at Pine Grove and Chautauqua Road landfills. We've been very careful about our work with this because of a 1995 agreement and a company that filed bankruptcy and left us with nothing, basically. And so we've been very diligent and very careful in this agreement, and we've had the city attorney's office involved, Clifton Fay and Lucy Sheftel, and they've reviewed everything, and I even received an email from our assistant city attorney yesterday that felt that this is most beneficial to the Columbus Consolidated Government. We have exit opportunities in this at 18 months, and there's another time frame if They're not producing what has been committed, and so we feel good about moving forward with this. And I'm going to ask Public Works Director Pat Bigler to share some of those things that we've discussed and agreements that have been reached and understandings that we have with this company. So, Pat Bigler.
Good morning. I'm going to reiterate just a bit and remind you, when we launched into this, we issued an RFP, we went through the full process to select a company to work with. The company selected was Enterdyne Power Systems. They then went out and did a very thorough investigation to ensure themselves and us that there is sufficient gas available from both Chautauqua and Pine Grove to assure that the whole project was economically feasible. They did find that it was appropriate to put in a power plant, and we're moving forward on that basis. What they're going to do under the agreement, at no cost to us, is to design, permit, and then install the gas collection system at Pine Grove and connect to the existing gas collection system at Chautauqua Road also. Now, that is a cost they're going to take on that we would have to pay for if we were simply installing the gas system. And Chautauqua is reaching the age where it needs quite a bit of repair work, and that is also included in their contract. So we'll avoid both of those costs. And then they will design, permit, and then operate the power plant. The agreed upon amount at this time to us for the gas used in the generation would be 40 cents per million MBTU, and when they sell to a third party, to an unrelated third party. When the landfill gas is sold to a third party for fuel, which is less processing, they will pay us 50 cents per million MBTUs. Payment will begin not when they've started seeing a profit, but from the very first day the power plant generates electricity. If they receive revenues for incentives, and there are incentives out there for environmental appropriate and sustainable use of gases, they will pay CCG 25% of whatever they're able to garner through grants and what have you, or incentives. They've agreed to a price increase beginning on the 5th anniversary, and it will be 1% of the price of landfill gas, and that is current price of landfill gas, not the power or what they sell the power for, but the actual landfill gas. And there are agencies that provide just, what the current levels are. And then 1% for each subsequent year. They will, of course, again, design, permit, and install the gas extraction system. They will operate the gas extraction system. We will not have to staff that or man that. They will purchase and install the power generation system, and they will share the revenue with us. They have the exclusive license to collect and sell all the landfill gas produced during the term of the agreement. However, they don't have gas rights. They just have exclusive use, and there are termination clauses defined in the contract. Now, we work closely with our environmental consultant, with the city attorney's office, and with Enterdyne to try to do our best to make sure this is an adequate and appropriate agreement and will protect the city's interests. So we did include an escalation of payment. We made sure that the city retains the gas rights, and there are appropriate termination clauses.
And so again, we'll answer any questions that you have, but we've, out of concern of what happened in the past, we wanted to be certain that we didn't go back down that road. And so I think we've got all of the appropriate language, measures in place. It's been vetted again by the city attorney, and all indication is that they feel that we're in good standing, or it's a good agreement for us at the city. So we'll answer any questions, but if no questions, we'll ask for your approval to proceed forward.
You know, this is almost too good to be true. I'm assuming I know Clifton well. It seems like a win-win-win. So you've looked this over and see that there's no loopholes or anything. This is something that we should have been doing really long ago. I think you and I had discussions about it. I think we talked about it. So this is great.
Yeah, this should,
I mean, this
should be a win-win agreement. Unfortunately, the 1999 agreement was never reviewed by our office or any other attorney for the city, and that's where we went to Chicago and everywhere else with bankruptcy. But
well, this is great.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a motion and a second.
I made a motion. I'm looking for a second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
You did it? Okay.
I see no more questions. Please vote. It passes.
Mayor Pro Tem, I've got street acceptance, requesting to accept a portion of Dreamboat Drive and that portion of Confetti Blush Drive in Old Town.
We have a motion and a second. The street acceptance. I see no questions.
Got a request to accept that portion of Highlands Drive located in Highland Phase 9, Garrett Creek. I'm sorry. Councilor Davis, on the last one, yes. Okay. So I've got another street acceptance, portion of Highlands Drive located in Highland Phase 9, Garrett Creek subdivision. It's been improved and engineering agrees with the acceptance.
We have a motion and a second for approval. I see no questions. Thank you.
Got another street acceptance, Wisteria Lane, portion of North Ivy Park Drive, Section 4, Phase 1 of North Ivy Park. It's been improved and recommended for acceptance by our engineering department.
It's been motion and second for acceptance. I see no questions. Ready for vote. It passes.
I've got a Petco grant. It's $25,000. There's no match. It's for spaying and neutering.
Petco grant has been motion and second. I see no questions. Ready for vote. It passes.
Got two purchase items. First, herbicide truck with sprayer. It's $55,252. It's a replacement vehicle.
The herbicide truck with sprayer there's a motion and a second. I see no questions.
Can I go ahead and make a motion for A&B?
It's been properly motion and second that we approve purchase A and B. I see no questions. They pass.
Mayor Pro Tem, I've got two additional updates. We've already talked about Leonard Street closure. 13th Street striping update from Donna Newman will be first, and then we'll have a Macon Road safety improvement update from Rick Jones, Planning Director. And so Director Donna Newman.
Okay, we're back to talk about the results of the study on the 13th Street corridor. As council's aware, we were here a few weeks ago to talk about it and give you a brief history. In 2011, we began discussions with Midtown, their desire, and not just Midtown, the organization, but some of the business owners along the 13th Street corridor, and their desire to redevelop this area, if you will, to renew and bring life back to it. As you know, in 2015, Midtown was awarded the Night Cities grant for the minimum grid project. And then in 2016, we saw construction signs going up. And we realized it wasn't the city going to do a project, it was GDOT. And so we started asking questions when they got ready to do the reconstruction or resurfacing, basically, of this particular project. And the desire, was there an opportunity to take a fresh look at this corridor and see if there was a way we could make some improvements? So if you'll remember, we came to council last year and we implemented phase 1, which included bike lanes, and some changes at the intersection of 13th and 13th, and we talked about it being a multiple phase project. And in December of 2016, we met with DOT again about the particular corridor from 5th Avenue to 13th Avenue. And we agreed that the only way we would ever really get a good idea of what might happen if the corridor was restriped was to do a test section. And so GDOT agreed to let us barrel off the lanes for a period of 2 weeks, and it was a little bit longer than 2 weeks because GDOT's permit ran from Saturday to Saturday, and I didn't want to pay overtime budgets and bring people in on Saturday, and you don't want to set up a change on a Friday because that's typically your heavily traveled day. So we set it up on a Thursday on the 11th, and then we took it down on the 31st because Monday was a holiday. And Tuesday, we wanted to make sure that everybody had looked at it and gathered data and got the information that they needed for that 2-week period. Existing conditions in the current configuration. Access for pedestrians are really not safe. I did observe several pedestrians, and keep in mind, because I'll note this several times in my presentation, that you got to remember off of 13th Street is Warren Williams, and there's a housing area there. And a lot of those residents utilize transit, they use Metra, and they also walk to get to the grocery store, as well as get to medical services, which is north of 13th. And so there is a need for pedestrian access through this corridor. And you may remember, and again, I'll mention it, but you may remember that there was a grant that we applied for and we received through GDOT to improve access, pedestrian access and ADA along 13th Street. So this is what this is talking about, as well as one thing that was brought about to our attention during the meeting was from Mr. Carmack in particular, is he owns a lot of those storefronts that you see on 13th, and his inability to get viable businesses in those storefronts due to the traffic. And I'm not so much sure that it was a volume issue as much as it was a speed issue with the traffic coming through there. And then noted that there are some site restrictions from some of the side streets accessing 13th Street. Just to review, phase 1 was 13th Street from 13th Avenue and 13th Avenue, where we had a reduction of the number of lanes. We added bike lanes and we improved the pedestrian crossings. We upgraded 2 of the crossings there to the rapid flashing beacons, and I'm sure Mr. Bergen, who owns businesses along there, would tell you that that was a success. It improved the traffic flow and the speed of traffic through that area. Phase 2 was 13th Street from 5th Avenue to 13th Avenue, and that's broken down into 2 sections, if you will. What's across the viaduct, and that's proposal is to go from 7 lanes to 5 lanes. And then from 10th Avenue to 13th Avenue would be to go from 5 lanes to 3 lanes. And this would be brought about from the resurfacing project by GDOT, and then they have to restripe it when they resurface it and what you put back. Now, I think one thing from some of the comments that we've received, and while I'm noting it, those comments from 13th Street along with Leonard, which was previously discussed, will be included in your package for next week for consideration. As everybody assumes that there's going to be bike lanes, well, we really haven't decided fully what might go along this particular section. I know that as part of the Gale study that was done in minimum grid, they do recommend it across the viaduct area. But between 10th and 13th, that's something that'll have to be discussed more thoroughly with GDOT. GDOT will have the final decision on this. It is a state route. And the question came up at last council meeting, what level would that decision be made? And from my understanding, it will be at the district level. The district engineer will have the authority to make that decision. And then Director Rick Jones will be coming forward to talk about some other safety improvements along State Route 22, which is Macon Road here. And then there's some futuristic projects as well. They do have a major focus on this particular route. The results. This was done by GDOT, and you see the dates there, and they went out and rode the corridor for at 3 different times during the day, and you'll see the travel times to get through that corridor. And again, this is from 13th to 5th Avenue. And you'll see that if you go through and compare them, and based on the statement that they made, that the increase in travel time was negligible. And I know when I went through there several times, and Ms. Hodge went through there several times, the city manager went through there several times, and Ms. Goodwin said she went through there several times. And then there was also a study done by Midtown, and we can include that. That was actually included in a package you received from them last week, where they initiated from the public to, when you're going through the corridor, measure your travel times. And so it was pretty similar to what the results were in the GDOT study. One thing to keep in mind, another note is a couple of days, Logan Kip from the planning department, he has a radar gun, and he went out and measured speed. And we did notice a significant reduction in the high speed that was measured. I think the one was like 57, which is really fast for an urban area. And that was brought down, during the construction, it was brought down to like 51. But the average speeds were pretty close, but there was some reduction in speed through the area. And if you'd gone out there on a routine basis, you would have definitely noted that. Some of the limitations of the study, as opposed to if it was permanently reduced, would be there would be some additional improvements in the signal system. There were some minor adjustments made, but as a whole, you would have to look at the traffic patterns and make adjustments for the signal systems all the way through the corridor. And then also look at how that traffic might impact other corridors. We did notice that the traffic was actually lower during the study. People found alternate routes, which they typically will do. And we do have other corridors in the area that are underutilized. And then there would also be additional traffic control and signage and markings that would be in place to give the traveling public more warning that lanes are being dropped or changes that would be upcoming that's really difficult to do during a temporary traffic control. And then again, there would be long-term effects on other corridors because we would see some people take a different route. And we would have to look at that. There's adequate capacity there. Why should council consider this? And I know you've received many calls and a lot of complaints. One thing that we need to think about is our systems that are in place today, a lot of them were developed years ago. So when we make a decision, we're actually making a decision for the future. And one thing that I'm sure you've heard and has been noted in everything that I read these days, it talks about millennials. And well, millennials prefer alternative transportation. They're not all going to have a car. They're going to use bicycles, they're going to walk, or they're going to use public transportation. And the increase in the transit ridership. So there's been an increase in Metro ridership. I did note that there are 2 bus stops between 10th and 13th, and there's an additional one right at the bridge at Warren Williams Road. So there are Metro bus stops along this corridor, and it is important that we note that when you have people riding Metro, you're going to have pedestrians. And again, they're going to need access back to the Metro transfer station, which again is north, as well as medical facilities, because we're just a few blocks from the hospital and doctor's offices and that sort of thing.
Excuse me, Ms. Newell, where are those stops?
Between 10th and 13th, there are actually 2 stops on the south side of 13th. I think one is between Cherry and 11th, maybe, and then one is close to 12th Avenue. And then there's another one once you make the right-hand turn on the 13th, right there at the bridge at Warren Williams. And I know a few weeks ago, the city manager at one of his staff meetings asked us to get out and ride the Metro bus. And that's eye-opening when you do things like that, because you see the city from a different perspective, and it brings your awareness to things that you may not notice riding in a car. But we did actually see a gentleman that got off the bus and had to cross the street, and he was going back to the transfer station. So there is a lot of pedestrian traffic in this area, and I actually watched one gentleman while I was out there monitoring one day try to get across the street, and it was a very dangerous situation. Examples of other cities that have taken on, you can Google this and you'll find that this is happening in a lot of cities, and just like it is here in Columbus, it's a challenge. There's a lot of opinions on both sides. And it has been undertaken in Athens, Georgia for Baxter Street, in Tampa, Florida, in Orlando, Florida, as well as in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and there are countless other locations that were undertaking a similar thing. So this is something staff is recommending. Of course, it's going to be council's decision whether we make a recommendation to the DOT. They are looking for a recommendation from the city and support from the city in making this change, and so we'll be coming back next week with that resolution.
And Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the resolution that will come to you next week will be asking to support and recommend permanent restriping of Georgia DOT SR 22, 13th Street, and 7 lanes to 5 and so forth. I wanted to just be clear that if council makes a recommendation, and of course the final decision is Georgia DOT's, but we're not moving curb and gutters, we're not doing construction work to reduce these lanes and to do this. It's a matter of they're going to be resurfacing and you're going to restripe. And so if you support it and Georgia DOT moves forward with it, and at some point if it's not working and you want to come back and reverse it, it'd be a matter of restriping. And so it's the expense is to restripe only, and there is no construction work. And again, if you were to reverse it and go back, it would be restriping all over again and no construction work in that regard. So I just wanted to make that clear that it could be considered a lengthy test run, and if it just based on the data, it appears it works, obviously, and if a year from now or 3 years from now you want to go back, it'd be simple as restriping. Just wanted to make that point.
Director Newman, thank you for the presentation. Going back to phase one, I did attend the meeting, and it was mentioned to me in that meeting that why phase one was necessary, and it made sense, and it worked very well. It was also mentioned to me that we would come to the corner there, because I asked a question that night about going across by Kinetic Credit Union. And at that time, they said they understood where I was, and they would turn the corner to connect with our bike trail coming from Medical Center down Linwood and hook in there. As sure as we do this, they are looking at bike lanes, and no doubt. All the talk of millennials, I get, but all the millennials own cars right now that are driving around here, and bicycles. Where's the economic development? Where are the jobs for all the millennials that's coming that we're trying to provide for?
Well, I think the economic development is from those storefronts where they can't get viable businesses in there because of lack of parking, because of the way that area was developed years ago. And in all likelihood, there was parking in front of the stores at some point in the past, and then the road was widened to accommodate traffic volumes. But in doing so, that also increased speeds. I know for a fact we had a lady that works in community reinvestment that was involved in an accident on the bridge, and there was a fatality. So there are some high speeds, not during the congestion time, but during off-peak hours, because those congestive times are very short spanned. But during the rest of the time, you have this big, wide open road, and cars are zipping through there at high rates of speed, and that's the concern for the pedestrian. And as you all know, there's try not to use too many engineering terms here, but there's a lot of vertical curvature to the road. There's some blind spots, if you will, and people that try to cross that road are currently having to cross 5 or 7 lanes of traffic. That's a lot to cross in a single point in time when you really can't see what may be coming over that bridge. So I think the economic development is not necessarily from the millennials, even though we have public meetings and we have millennials that attend, and a lot of them don't have cars, and a lot of them are riding bicycles, but the economic development is from those storefronts, putting viable businesses back in there, getting them back on the tax roll so that we get sales tax and we get additional property taxes and that sort of thing for the city.
I meant from an angle of attracting millennials to Columbus in order to work, so that we would have.
Well, they look for amenities.
Let me just say, and our goal is to retain the young people we have,
Right.
Yeah, the one we
and
have.
to recruit and have others say that I want to go to Columbus because it's a cool city, and they are they've kept pace with time.
I'm on that page with that, but what I'm saying is, where are the jobs for them to work?
Well, I think we, the Development Authority, Chamber, City, all.
We've had some cutbacks lately, so I'm just concerned.
Pardon?
I said we've had some cutbacks lately, so I'm just concerned.
Well, I think we all got to work.
Yeah.
I mean, this council, and that's why we have we provide the millage to economic development, a portion to the chamber and a portion stays with us. And, you know, the goal, I think they're working every day, and we're working every day to retain and attract jobs. And we've got to have something to attract with, and that's why we work every day to package things to make sure we do.
Yeah, we're packaging. I just thought that GDOT and others had a foresight for the growth of the city. The reason that was put together, that corridor, because it matches up with going into Uptown and into Phoenix City. Everything's kind of wide open there. But anyway, my next point is And the testing of Phase 2, our documentation says from 13th over to 5th. And in the resolution piece today that we had to look at, it says from 13th over to veterans. So is it to 5th? Or is
It's
it
to 5th. I apologize. That was an error. It's to 5th. There's not any changes proposed at this time from 5th to veterans.
Okay, okay. So we're reducing from 7 to 5 lanes from 5th Avenue to 10th Avenue. That's right across the bridge
That's
there?
the bridge.
Okay. And then 5 lanes to 3 from 10th down to, that's what, to Kinetic, the area with the
13th,
shops
right.
and everything? Okay.
Council Allen?
Hold on, not quite finished.
Oh, I'm sorry.
On the signal upgrades, that's coming through the, that little stretch. That's what you're talking about?
Well, GDOT has a project now to upgrade the signal at Warren Williams Road, and that goes along with our grant that we're receiving from GDOT to do, add ADA ramps and sidewalks, so there will be improving the pedestrian crossing there. When I said signal upgrades, that would be looking at the timing for that corridor and seeing if there needs to be adjustments to existing signals. Eventually, we'll have to look at the intersection of 13th and 13th and figure out what's the proper traffic control for that area. There's been discussions of, is that an area for a roundabout? Is that a traffic signal? Needs to be upgraded. So there's still some discussions to happen at that particular intersection because there's a lot of changes, if you will, in the corridor at that particular intersection. But there's also some proposed changes out here at Rigdon and Citizens Way and Boxwood, and I think Director Jones is going to talk about those in a minute, but it's a corridor wide. There's proposed changes out in Councilor Allen's district, and we're going to have a meeting with the DOT to talk about some of those. And it's not all about signals. They are, across the country, they're looking at alternatives to signals, just like we have when we started introducing roundabouts in the city. So that's kind of where we're at. We would have to look at the whole corridor once the changes are made and give traffic time to adjust, because traffic will adjust. And look at the timing of the signal in that corridor, and we're trying to do that at other locations throughout the city as well.
Okay. The other piece on the testing of the road was brought to my attention the other day when I was talking with a few people that the traffic count went down because people took alternative routes because they thought it was construction going on and it was something that was going to go on temporarily, completed, the road would open back up. They didn't realize it was a test to narrow the road down, downsize the road. So they were a little concerned about that fact. The other piece is, and this is just something I say all of the time, it would be nice if once we have different groups to come up with ideas and meet with you and GDOT and everyone to have some type of public meeting with the bicycle riders, the walkers, the auto drivers, and put everybody in a room and just get all your ideas on the table and stop trying to force feed everybody with, this group wants this group wants something else, and just put it on the table and have an open discussion and come up with ideas that benefit the whole community and let them be a part of it. Because I think if this is truly something that needs to happen, it probably could have been discussed and probably come to the same conclusion a long time ago without us having to go back and forth and get all the phone calls and figure out what everybody wants to do. I'm just real concerned all of the time that council is faced with trying to take the phone calls, move the city forward, but we don't get all of the input all of the time. And a lot of the people at some point, and why, I don't know, are afraid to come out now because of backlash for whatever reason. So they call us. And that's where all the questions come from. Thank you.
Councilor Thomas.
A couple of things. One of the things that has been said by some of the proponents of this configuration, when the concern about bike riders is brought up, and one of the things that has been said is, well, this is not about bike lanes, but as has been said earlier, it's going to be about bike lanes. And one of my concerns is, what is that bicycle rider going to do going west on 13th when they get to 5th Avenue? They can't continue on 13th Street from 5th Avenue to Veterans and Veterans to uptown to the bridge, to the 13th Street Bridge over the Chattahoochee, unless you have, McMullen or International Funeral Home or somebody parked there to take them off the road, because there is no place for them to ride their bicycle. And one block over on 14th, we are putting in a tremendous new facility for bike riders. And I would hope that that area would be used much more so than 13th Street for bicyclists. One of my other concerns, and I haven't seen this in here anywhere, but I have spoken with both current and retired first responders. And one of the very major concerns that was raised was that 13th Street is a major corridor for both fire trucks and ambulances from the station number 1 on the corner of 2nd Avenue and 10th Street to the Lake Bottom area. That's their territory. And they are very concerned about the impact that they believe shrinking this area this road will have, particularly if you allow parallel parking. That already it's hard to get through there. And if you shrink the number of lanes and add parallel parking on either side of the street, it's going to be even worse. And I don't know, I haven't seen anything in here about those concerns, except that, as I said, both current and retired members of the command staff have told me that that's a very, very real concern for them.
Well, what we'll do is, let's talk to fire EMS, police, and sheriff, and see what their concerns are. So we need to talk directly with them.
Well, they said to me, and I know having been in that area, that both this station number 1 on 10th and 2nd and station number 6 out on Brown Avenue use that street with a great deal of regularity. They can't go to 11th Street because they can't go through the underpass.
Yeah.
So that's a major concern for them.
So we'll check with them and hear their concerns and see if we can alleviate them. Because I'm always amazed when I'm in Atlanta or Memphis or New York, and how public safety, I mean, it's congested. But, they, or Orlando, I was at down there, but, we're talking 7 lanes now, going to 5. And then in my mind, I'm thinking about Atlanta and New York and these other places where it's really, they have serious traffic congestion, and they're doing this stuff. But 7 lanes is what we have now on the bridge.
That's correct.
And we're talking about going to 5. I just, we'll talk to them.
We'll talk to them.
Well,
Be
2
very
of those
acceptable.
lanes are turn lanes.
Yeah. Well, and I understand, because I see them, I don't advocate this, but I see them get on the wrong side of the road, honking the horn to get down Buena Vista Road. I've seen it. Yeah.
And if we can make it where our first responders don't have to do that, I think we
agree.
need to do that.
I agree.
One of the other things that, I also traveled that area quite a bit during the test phase. And one of the things that I saw twice was a tractor-trailer truck trying to come out of one of those side streets onto 13th. And they were having quite a time to do that because of the barrels. So just keep that piece in mind. And I don't know about my fellow counselors, but, and maybe the millennials don't call old people like me, but the calls and the contacts that I received were vastly in favor of keeping the road as it is now, to hundreds to less than 25. And the 25 that I did receive were people that I feel like have a vested interest in pulling this down. So I will tell you too that if the resolution that the city manager is bringing to us next week passes, if it is not a unanimous vote, I believe that what is being recommended to us in the resolution is that we authorize the city manager to write a letter to GDOT saying the city approves it, agrees with this. But if it's not a unanimous vote, I want that noted in the letter, that, and let GDOT deal with the fallout from that. I think that if we do this, no matter what the good intentions are, we're going to have people who are very, very upset with this configuration. And I just have some real concerns about doing it at this point. Many of those businesses along between 13th and 10th have parking lots either behind the business or beside the business. And in some of those, I tell you, quite frankly, I wouldn't pull in their parking lot. It's a mess. So maybe, instead of changing the road, spruce up your parking lot, and I might go in there. But anyway, that's, and we'll have, I guess, more conversation next week when we get there.
Yes, ma'am.
And I will say that I will make sure the resolution is worded that I will not be writing a letter. I will simply forward the resolution to them that would say it. And I think that's what we ask, that there's an attached resolution. And it would
Did I misread it? Didn't it say that it was to,
it says, approval is requested for city manager to approve the attached resolution in support and recommendation of permanent restriping of Georgia Department of Transportation, so forth. And so it would be that we would have a resolution.
the city manager is authorized to send the Georgia Department of Transportation a letter of support for the proposed reduction. That's the letter I'm talking about.
Okay. And it would, and I'm saying we'll change it. It'll simply be a resolution we'll send the resolution that you either approve or vote down to Georgia DOC.
Even if it's approved, if it's not a unanimous vote, I would like to have that noted in whatever communication goes to GDOT.
Sure.
Okay? Thank you.
Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I wanted to ask, not necessarily Ms. Newman, but maybe the city manager. I'm talking about the sidewalks in the area. It was mentioned earlier that there's a need to try to restructure that. I don't have a problem with that. I think that might be a viable solution. My only question is why now? Why is it a problem now in conjunction with the 13th Street configuration? Why wasn't it a problem 5 years ago or 10 years ago? I mean, that area's been there for quite some time. Warren Williams has been there longer than I am old, I think. And if there's a need for them to walk to a store or to patronize some other place, why is it just a need now and being used as a justification for the 13th Street situation? It just concerns me. If it's a need, then I would like to separate it from the 13th Street project considerations and look at it independently and try to work out something for the neighborhood in that regard. I don't see it as a viable solution to 13th. I don't see it as piggybacking on 13th. And as Councilor Thomas and Councilor Huff said, and I think I mentioned last week, I've received just a lot of calls in support of keeping it the way it is. Nobody's mentioned bike lanes to me. Nobody's called me about a need for bike lanes. I'm concerned where these bikers are riding to work. My feeling is they live much closer to their job than most of us do, and they probably have a shower there that they can dress themselves when they get there. Because I know in the summer, if you ride a bike 100 yards, you will need a shower. So I'm just not hearing the millennial request for bike lanes. I'm not hearing it. I hope I'm not opening the door for that, but still, I'm just not hearing it. I'm concerned, the new concern that Councilor Thomas brought up about the public safety vehicles, that is a viable consideration for me to look at this a little more closely. So I would like for you to think about the sidewalks, though, as we move forward.
Okay.
Councilor Barnes.
Yeah, I want to just concur with what Councilor Thomas said. I'm concerned with what you said about public safety, but I have heard an onslaught from the citizens against this here. And I will echo what Councilor Allen said. Why now? I mean, and one thing that I've always been against here since I've been on council, we always want to go and say, look what other cities are doing. You know what I hear from the people? Why do we do that? We're talking about something that's germane to Columbus. Why are you going to bring up something what Athens or Tampa or Orlando's doing? You know, and it's irksome to me anyway when I hear something like that. I've heard from so many people that they're against this here, and we're supposed to be representing what the citizens want. And so I want to go on record to also say that we need to send that I'm not hearing anything in support of this. And as Gary just said, why, talking about sidewalks, why now is this brought up? So I just want to go on record to voice my opposition to this here.
Okay, I see no more questions. I'll take that back.
Thank you, Director Newman.
One more.
Councilor Huff.
Director Newman, last point. I just want to go on record because I talk with the biking community a lot. I was one of the ones that was labeled against them in the beginning. I've never been against the biking community. It's just the way it should be. The courses and the trails should be put together. But what I want to bring to the attention is we're spending millions of dollars coming from, I guess it's millions of dollars, but a lot of money to come from the Warm Springs roadside, Thompson roadside, down by the medical center, Linwood, 14 to the river. And if that is such a concern to connect a good ride from Lake Bottom area back to the river, then all we have to do is figure out a way to connect the trail to turn right at 13 and hook up at Linwood and out to the river.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I have one final update. That's a Macon Road safety improvement update.
Good afternoon. I promise I will try to make this as painless as possible. That we are now into the afternoon evening, so let me go on. I want to talk to you just real briefly, and this will be brief, about Macon Road pedestrian improvements. This is an effort we've been working with through Midtown and through the Georgia Department of Transportation to improve the pedestrian crossings along Macon Road. There are times when you do really literally take your life in your own hands when you try to cross sections of Macon Road here. And we just want to talk about this for the most part. You should know up front that we did have a public meeting on this back on May 4th, and we invited folks to come and look through these so-called improvements going on out there, just to get their feedback. We had some positive results from this. Everything you're going to see, though, is there's nothing magical about it. It's just pedestrian improvements to make sure we can safely get folks across the street. Take, for instance, here is at Buena Vista and Warren Williams. There'll be added some crosswalks. There'll be ADA accessible ramps put in, sidewalks. There also will be some pedestrian heads put in there. And let me underscore this right now, too, so we'll get this out of the way. This is not at our cost. This is at GDOT's cost. GDOT's come. We've asked GDOT for their cooperation, and they have agreed to help install these improvements. But again, here, the blue area you see on the screen here today is the new area to be put in for the crosswalks and pedestrian signals and so forth at that point. Again, just to make sure we provide for that. The same thing can be said here over here at Rigdon, out here in front of the building, Rigdon and Macon. Again, we're improving the crosswalks to go across the street there. Again, pedestrian signals will be added, and there'll be some ADA, of course, accessibility added to this area as well. Again, to make sure we get folks across this roadway safely at that point. This is one that I want to make sure you understand about as well. This is at Citizen Way here, and also in front of the building, right? Citizen Way here, right out here in front of the school district where you come down that roadway. The idea was intended to, excuse me, to promote some pedestrian crossings here in terms of improvements. You'll see, I didn't highlight very well here, this area right here I'm showing you on the screen that I've just circled would be a concrete median put in, and you would provide for left-hand turn movements at that point. The concrete median at that point would be basically a refuge island for some folks. They walk halfway across and for whatever reason, traffic light changes or whatever, they just can't go any further. We provide a refuge for that area. But again, you would have here, I'm showing you where this little blue arrow here, you'd have left turn movements going on there. The red area, the solid red area that you see on here also, though, indicates another additional concrete median. At the public meeting when we had it, we had some interest, of course, from folks that either work or eat on Mercury Drive, particularly some of the restaurants there. And I promised them at that time that we wouldn't go any further, that we would stop, hear their concerns, and meet with representatives from GDOT, and we have done that. So in terms of what you see here, from going from this solid red concrete median, we're now going to where you see this blue area on the screen here. There will still be a concrete median at that point here. Again, this is the area I'm talking about here that I just circled in red. That would still be a concrete median. However, this section up here that I'm showing to you now in green would still be open, but it would have what they call delineators. And the best way I know how to describe those, if you've gone down Hilton, close to where the Fall Line Trace comes in, you see there are some delineators there, the red delineators. They would be out here, basically where you see these little blue dots on the screen on both sides. They would be there basically to deter folks from coming out, particularly the gas station over here and these little stores over here over here in the yellow area from coming out and making a left-hand turn. It would not completely prevent them from doing it, but hopefully they would be discouraged enough not to make that effort. The concern we heard from the businesses on Mercury was that a lot of folks are still are coming down, making that left-hand turn onto Mercury to get to their businesses. They said if we were to force those folks back down to, what's my next road? Auburn. Yeah, thank you, down to Auburn Avenue, they would only congest that intersection where Mercury ties back into at that point. This is what GDOT has come back to us and said they could live with and would go forward with. The businesses like this idea, and we're going to go forward with that idea of providing that, they'll still provide that left turn lane, but there'll be delineators, and there will still be a concrete median there in front of really where CVS is now, so it'll be difficult from that standpoint. Again, these are all safety factors to make sure the turn movements don't interfere with the pedestrians and vice versa when it's all said and done involved here. And last but not least is right here at Cross Country and the entrance to the old Kmart Shopping Center itself. Again, there'll just be pedestrian improvements. There were crosswalks.
Mr. Jones.
The pedestrian lights will be upgraded and so forth.
Councilor Hoff has a question.
Yes.
Quick question. I didn't want you to have to back up. If you could, the one before Citizens Way?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Is that the one? Is another main one? Major one? Go back.
Back to Rigdon?
Yeah, that's Rigdon.
That's Rigdon.
Okay. I thought we were down this.
No, that's the extent. We only go down as far down to the entrance into Cross Country Plaza.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. But generally speaking, those are the improvements we're talking about making along this roadway, that GDOT's going to be making for us. Plus, in terms of that, eventually, they will come in and actually resurface all this section of Macon Road as well as all of 13th. So we're trying to coordinate that with them and make sure this thing happens. But
Okay, turn across the street with the service station. You said we're trying to deter them from turning left out of the service station.
Out of the service station? Yes, ma'am, over here? Mm-hmm. Yeah, this will discourage folks making a left-hand turn and going eastbound on Macon Road out of the gas station. They'll have to come up to the signal, make a U-turn here, at this point here, where there will be a signal now. There will be an activated signal when there's somebody coming into that turn lane. But they'll have to make that turn and go back that way to make that work. Again, it's provide protection on that. There's a little bit of concern about in terms of having come across a couple of lanes there to make that happen, but it'll also discourage them completely from fully making that left-hand turn without some kind of protection. Yes, sir. There'll be a at Citizen Way.
Make that U-turn?
Yes, there'll be a signal there.
Okay.
It'll have to be activated when they get to that lane, but there will be a signal.
But they can't come to the light directly out of the service station, right?
They can make that right-hand turn and come down to the signal itself. They won't be able to make a left-hand turn and go back across Mercury.
So you're gonna make people come out of the station, do a U-turn in the middle of Macon Road?
They'll be at a signalized intersection here at Citizen Way. That's
Citizens Way right there.
This is Citizens Way.
There's a traffic signal there.
I know, but the people coming out of the service station are going, he's saying they're going to have to do a U-turn if they want to go east.
They'll have to come to the signal to make that turn. It's certainly, I understand your concern, but it's certainly a lot safer than then having to cross basically 6 lanes of traffic to get to that point. I mean, that's the issue here, is trying to get them safely out of that.
The safest thing to me is to force them to make a right turn and go up to Rigdon and turn around and come back. I
don't necessarily disagree with that.
Have you've been that way at lunch?
I know, I have, but I don't disagree. What I'm saying to you, Councilor Allen, is they can make that turn. It would be a lot safer at Rigdon, though, you're right.
Georgia DOT traffic engineers came up with this scheme?
Yes, sir. And they've taken it back to work on it.
It still begs the question. I don't care which engineer came up with it.
It's crazy out there at 5 o'clock.
You're talking about a T-bone situation right there, which is the worst wreck you can have.
And I'm not advocating that, I'm just saying, you're right. The safest way would be for them to go to Rigdon and make that
Don't kill
turn.
the message.
I'm saying
not
they
arguing,
could.
I'm not blaming you.
I know.
I'm
But-
questioning the,
The DOT.
I'm just saying to you that they could make that turn if they wanted to, based on the traffic, like any
but
condition
will
of
we
the
put
traffic.
up no U-turn signs?
We could put it up there, sure. We
You
could
should, or
advocate
the
it.
city's going to be sued.
What, put no U-turn up there, or,
Yes, put a no U-turn up there.
okay.
My goodness,
So they're gonna have to go all the way to Rigdon if they live east. They would have to go all the way up to Rigdon
Come back. It's crazy.
and come back. Well,
Well-
they can't make a U-turn at Rigdon either.
Well, if you would point out the concerns expressed to the Georgia DOT engineers and talk about the no U-turn there and see what they come up with.
Absolutely. We can do that, and we'll do that.
And there's no way they can put the traffic
Okay.
signal so it's both sides, is it? Citizens Way and the service station.
No,
I don't think so.
You got a sidewalk there, there's the curb and gutter, that you don't,
Can't do it.
Okay.
it doesn't line up.
Yes, ma'am, this building right there, that's your gas station there, service station.
It's kind of close to it.
It's right there.
Councilor Baker.
Thank you. Yeah, Rick, I'm just not sure how you get out and get in the queue to make that turn back.
Which one are you talking about? From the
Coming out
gas-
of the service station, you're going to have to get in the
Well-
queue or lane or something to turn back the other way, and I'm not sure how that's going to.
I'm just saying to you
Well,
that there is a
You know, based on what I see, if I was going to leave the gas station, I'd go up to the next street and come back.
I would
wouldn't-
think so,
And I'm not,
too.
you know,
I'm
as it
just
stands
saying-
now, there's not a loop at Rigdon.
Right.
And that does service the interstate, so, you know, you hate to impact their business too much, so, I mean, you don't want to say you can't come out of there and get back to the interstate, because that's not going to work either.
No.
So it is. But let me ask you this, on the blue shaded part, did you say that is or is not going to be a median?
That's a median, there's a concrete.
It will be?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, that was my question too.
And there'll be enough distance after the end of the median to get in that left turn to hit Auburn for those businesses there? I can't tell from here how much room you got there, but,
Well, we're right. You're talking about going to Auburn itself?
yeah.
Yeah.
At the very end of the blue section?
You're right
You'll
there.
have to get in that, I'm assuming there'll be a left lane turn.
Yes, sir, there'll still be a left-hand turn there to Auburn. And there'll be enough queuing in that action to make it happen. Because you're really right there, I'm trying to visualize this myself, you're really right there at end of CVS, where the building is at CVS.
Yeah.
So you've got enough room to make that turn, yes, sir.
Yeah, and that would need to get blocked, because people turn left into that CVS, and it's not
Correct.
set up for a left-hand turn at all.
Correct, that's
It's
right.
set up, yeah, that one needs to
It
be.
works.
You better put a
I said,
U-turn up
that
there.
left-hand turn works, going into CVS.
Well, it doesn't work very well.
I've tried it a few times.
Oh, you're the one I saw trying that. Okay, I wondered who that was. Okay, now I got you. But and I'm glad it's blocked.
If I could, that was my question too, was my next point was is there enough queue distance to allow people to get in? I mean, how many are we eliminating? I mean, I've seen it back up there, several cars deep, but it looks like you may have 5-car access for that turn lane.
I want to say at least that many, hopefully a little bit more than that, but I don't have an absolute number for you from this aspect, but we can find out, let you know.
So
I don't
is
think we
there-
show it. No, we really don't show it on that one.
Would you ask the GDOT engineer if about a no U-turn sign
Yes.
on that end of the
Yes, sir.
paved area?
Okay?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Jones. Mayor Pro Tem, that concludes my agenda.
Yeah. Councilor Davis.
I'm sorry, Miss City Manager, I didn't get to push my button quick enough, but I'm not, certainly, I'm going to make a comment in general here. I hope nobody throws stones at me, but And sometimes they'll say if you keep doing what you've always done, you're not going to get anywhere at all. And with some of these things that we just talked about, you got to somewhat keep an open mind and trying to find ways to improve the best way you can. And I know the challenges, and I respect everybody's position and their thoughts on these things, and I listen, but it's okay sometimes to reach out there and be open-minded and try new things to see if you can just do it a little bit better. That's all. And sometimes that's a hurdle to get over. But I will mention to you on some of the topics that we just discussed and pertaining to roads and all. There's a great website out there called Strong Towns. And it talks about some of these challenges that's out there, Mr. City Manager, and I would encourage all my colleagues and others to take a look at that. But, and it talks about a lot about the status quo, basically. You keep doing things the same way, you never seem to get anywhere. But, towns, even ours, have challenges. And, I always want to make sure that we're trying to get where we need to be. I love this city of ours, and and I want us to. I don't want us to always be lagging. I want us to be at the top in some of these things, and certainly these are subjects and things that we need to work on. So I just personally, I'm keeping an open mind.
Sure, thank you.
Are you finished?
That concludes my agenda.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Clerk.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem and members of council, on the clerk's agenda, have one item of information, a biographical sketch of Ms. Chai Kennedy, who's interested in serving on our Circle Commission. We've received correspondence from Ms. Judy Tucker, who serves as the secretary to the Circle Commission. They are asking that Ms. India Nino's seat be declared vacant.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We need to take a vote on
This is
item two.
Item 2.
Yes, we have a motion and a second, but we didn't take a vote.
Okay. Are we going to do a voice vote? All those in favor of that motion, say aye. Any opposes? It's been motioned that the minutes be received. All those in favor of that motion, say aye. Any opposes?
On our board appointments, Mr. Reynolds Biggerstaff has been renominated. He can be confirmed. Second.
All those in favor of the motion, say aye. All those opposed?
On our building authority, Mr. Kel Jackson has resigned. This is council's appointment. We'll need a replacement for his seat. Then on our Circle Commission, Ms. Nino's seat has been declared vacant. Mr. Tataski's seat.
We can nominate Ms.
Yes, if someone would like to nominate Ms. Kennedy.
I'll nominate her.
Okay. We'll bring this back at our next meeting for confirmation. On our Community Development Advisory Council, Mr. Teddy Reeves as well as Mr. Jonathan Davis has both resigned. This is District 7 and District 8's representative. On our Development Authority, Mr. Fernando Vidri has resigned. We do have two nominees. Councilor Garrett is nominating Mr. Douglas, and Councilor Henderson is nominating Mr. Seven Hollingsworth, and we'll bring this back next week for a vote. On our Downtown Development Authority, Mr. Ernest Smallman seat will be coming up. He is eligible to succeed himself. And then we'll need a nominee for Mr. Ferdree's seat. On our Keep Columbus Beautiful Commission, Councilor Davis, Ms. Brenda Pulaski, this is your nominee. She will be moving out of Muskogee County, so we'll need a replacement for that seat. And also District 6, Councilor Allen, this is your nominee. And and on Ms. Mr. Nathan Rogers, I spoke with Ms. Harden yesterday. She wants to continue on the Convention and Visitors Board, so we'll need a replacement for this seat. And then on our pension board, the mayor is working on a replacement for Captain Burnett. On our Planning Advisory Commission, Mr. Michael Green's black seat will be expiring at the end of August. He is eligible to serve again, as well as Mr. Wallace Davis. And then on our Recreation Advisory Board, Mr. Gary O'Bruce, District 2, has resigned. I'm sorry, their seat, Mr. Bruce has resigned, and Ms. Tracy Belk's seat has been declared vacant. He
To
is.
succeed himself, is that correct?
Yes, he is. Have you heard anything from the professionals? I have not. I have to call them back again. I've called them a couple occasions and left a message. And that's all I have, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Anybody else have anything?
No, I haven't. Comment.
Is your light is on?
Yes.
Councilor Barnes?
I know that for the past couple of weeks, I've had discussions with some of the employees reference this payroll conversion. And I know it's something that this city needs to do. And I also know that as far as our employees are concerned, everyone on this council has a concern for their welfare. So this is primarily for education's sake. I sat down with some of the general service employees, grade 7. Now I'm speaking for the 62 who are in public works. And what the information that I wanted to know, first of all, and I used a number of them, but I'm going to illustrate with just using one, their pay period, how they're paid. They're paid weekly. So I used one of their pay vouchers. In a 40-hour week, normal 40-hour pay week, this employee receives $468.80. And in this pay period, they take out the medical and the dental. So after the medical and dental and all the taxes and whatever, this employee takes home 40-hour work week, $286.32. The following week, where no deductions are made out of the pay, that employee takes home $348.04. Now, I want you to keep that in mind, those net income, $286.32 in a pay week when medical, dental, and whatever is taken out. And then the 40-hour pay week when nothing's taken out. Now, let's go where the 20-hour bonus is going to. The 20-hour bonus, that same employee, gross pay will be $234.40. After taxes, that employee takes home $132.15. I don't know how a family can survive on something like that for a week. You can't get groceries, gas money, and this is happening in August when the majority of the parents are trying to get supplies for schools for their kids. So this is not about placing fingers. This was just brought to my attention. I sat down with a number of the employees, the ones that are paid weekly, and this is a situation that we have our employees in. Now, I know we feel for them, and something's got to be done in a situation like this here for 62 of those employees are public works. Now, I don't know how many we have citywide. I don't know how many citywide are general service grade 7. But I sat down with a number of them at my office, and I just can't fathom a family making it on $132.52. So I think that between now and then, we might need to try to think of something, or I know we care about our employees, but at the same time, I know this is something that needs to happen as far as a pay conversion. But I think we have time to try to think about something when we have employees that in a week's time are going to try to subsist off $132.15. This is just for us to bat around on our head and start thinking about some of these employees. Okay. That's all I have.
I thought the bonus pay was in addition to the regular pay for the
Say
week.
what?
I thought the bonus pay was in addition to their regular pay for the week.
I don't think it is.
No, I don't think it
Uh-uh.
is. I didn't understand it that way.
Educate me on that. Now, I thought the pay ended.
So, Counselor Barnes, for the weekly paid employees, they will be foregoing a full week's check on
Right.
August the 11th, but the August 18th check, it'll be 2 weeks.
Yeah, I know that. I'm talking about, and I figured I was right, I'm talking about that week, and I do realize that. And I sat down, and I did the best to try to investigate, because I thought it was in addition to a check, but I was told by them it was not. And then I did do a little bit more investigation. I found out, no, they're going to just be receiving that bonus.
Right. On the 11th, the weekly employees.
That is correct. And the
That's
following week, they will be receiving two. But what in that week, when you think about employees that have families, $132.15, that's going to be a pretty rough week for a lot of employees. Not pointing a finger at this government, but I think it's just something that we need to bat around and start thinking about, because you're talking about a lot of, just in public works, it's 62. I don't know how many, can you tell me how many wage grade general service 7 we have? Do you know off the top of your head?
I'm not.
But just 60, you're talking about 62 employees now. Now, I'm not saying that we're doing anything wrong, but I just think we need to think about this here between now and August. Because 132 that's not even groceries. And it's happening at a time when a lot of the families have to buy supply for their kids, getting their kids ready for school. This is just real life, living every day. And I just think it's just something that we need to throw in the mix, and we need to think about between now and then for those employees. And I know all of us really care for, and that's one thing that I discussed. I said to let them know, we, as a council, the mayor and the council, city manager and deputy city managers, we care for employees. And sometimes you can overlook things. And I think this is just something that we just need to give a second look to. That's it. Not pointing any fingers, not saying any blame. I was informed of this here by way more than one person, but I had to use one example. But it was an education experience for me. And so I just wanted to share that with the rest of the council so we can start thinking about something, about maybe coming up with something that will ease that week for that. That's going to be a pretty rough week for those employees, particularly ones that have families. That's it.
Counselor Davis.
And I would like to echo Councilor Barnes. Sometimes you think you've got it all figured out and clarified, and then you only go back, you hear more input and more concerns about it, and you realize that maybe I don't have it just right. And I too have been hearing from some of these employees, as Councilor Barnes stated, that they are really concerned. And the city manager, I would echo the concern there about what can we do, because it does concern me, and I just want to make sure that our employees are all on the same page at the same time, because I still sense there's a lot of confusion out there. But, and even though we've talked about it, I still think that we may need to go over this some more just from that standpoint, because it's not totally clarified, I don't think. But even at that, if what Councilor Barnes is talking about, or what's perceived, or what is going to happen is true, it's going to be tough for these individuals. It's going to be tough for these employees. So I'm kind of of the mindset too that what are our options? What can we do? Maybe there's something we need to do a little more, a little better here. But I just wanted to express that as a concern that I share.
even if you do a payroll advance that week, it's gonna happen from then on because starting in September, they'll be paid every other week, right?
That's correct.
So the payroll advance will not solve the problem.
And we've researched, different ways, other places, other governments, other nonprofit organizations such as universities and colleges. We researched, some of the things that they've done, and, some places did offer advances. I've seen it where it wasn't even 100%. It was a 75% advance that they offered that the employee then had to pay back. There was other places, they implemented this type of change, and there was nothing that was given to employees. And so, I get the concerns of, council and the employees. I'm most certainly one of those employees that, I have to figure out how I'm going to pay for daycare differently during the month of August. But, if the revenues were there to support us, the initial thought, and I know my initial thought was that, we hope to give a full week. But as it came down to, balancing the budget and the revenues being on the downward trend that they, currently own, it worked out to only being the 20 hours bonus that we could afford to do, right now. And maybe it's nothing that's going to help them, in August. I don't know if there's anything we can do to, from a mid-year perspective. I know that doesn't help people in August, but it's tough.
Councilor Baker.
Yeah, and I've shared the same concerns, and I've actually studied this fairly a good bit at length, and I probably have a difference of opinion with the Finance Department on the withholding taxes, because and I realize some of it's statutory, Social Security can't do anything about it, but the federal and state combined is 27%, and that's a lot. Most of our employees are not going to be at that rate. The regs give you a default rate, and I don't know whether we're using that or the new payroll. Who's doing that? Is the new payroll processor doing that check or us?
We'll be doing that check.
Yeah, and I realize this may be just a difference of opinion, but if you read the regs, 25% is a default option, but you're not required to use that. And we've got people who are going to be, some of our weeklies are probably in the zero tax rate, maybe 5 or 10. So we're taking withholding taxes out, and they may get them back next March when they filed. That doesn't help if you got to pay rent next week.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not, I'm not beating up on the Finance Department at all. I support them every time I can, but I would like for them to take another look at the withholding rates. That may be an option to free up some money. And I probably shouldn't say this in public, but in the overall scheme of things, one 20-hour paycheck ain't gonna mean a thing from withholding taxes at the end of the year. When you mix it in with 52 other paychecks, one 20-hour check ain't gonna matter. But we don't want to hurt the employees to the point where they are going to owe taxes, but one 20-hour check is not going to have that kind of impact. So I would ask that you go back and review the withholding rates and see if there's not another option so they don't lose 27%.
For the 20-hour check.
For that one 20-hour check.
Well,
that's all I'm talking about, that one 20-hour gap check.
Well, you're correct as far as the 25% being a flat rate, but that's because we're processing this bonus outside of a normal payroll. Now, if we process this bonus as part of a regular payroll, it sort of defeats the purpose of the bonus, which was to sort of bridge the gap between the August 4th date and the August 18th date. So, I mean, if we, in order for the tax rates to be different, we'd have to process it as part of a normal payroll, either on the 4th of August or the 18th of.
And I would probably debate that issue if we had the time. I won't do that. But I understand supplemental check rules.
Right.
I understand those. But even when you read through the payroll regs, there's an option about taking that check plus the next check, and there's another way, and working through. as if it were to be this way.
And I
it
have
gives you
this,
some other options.
I had the conversation with staff, and then, of course, they started quoting me the law.
I understand.
And I said
I've read them
to
myself. I know.
them very clearly, we are going to follow the law, is what I told them. So what they've done is because I did not want them to take out of that bonus check.
Right.
But given the law, I'm sure you would want me to tell them to follow the law, and that's what I did. And
Right.
And so, but we can go back and take a look. If there's a way to not do it, that's what I wanted to do in the first place.
Yeah.
But I just didn't want.
Well, maybe it's how you interpret the regs, but I think the flexibility is there to do that. The regs give you, other than, your statutory taxes, you can't do anything about, your Social Security.
Well,
This is
well,
just
let us
about
take
withholding, but it gives you the 25%. When I read them, it doesn't mandate it, it doesn't require it, it doesn't prefer it. It says, here are some options. Use the one that fits your situation for the pool of employees you're dealing with.
Well,
and if you think about it from a practical matter, why would you hit a weekly employee with 25% withholding?
And I absolutely agree with that. And we're going to take a look at it, and if we can figure out and read the law and interpret it the way you're interpreting it, we're going to do it.
Well, sometimes practical matters need to be looked at in a practical way, because the IRS has no advantage. They have no preference to over-withhold.
Well, we're going to have this.
At all. That's not their job. They don't care anything about it, but I think this is forcing you to do that.
Well, this discussion
And
of the
that's what
bonus,
concerns me.
I'm going to add it to my agenda for next week so that we can, we're going to look at every option, because it's our goal to, we want the best for our employees.
I agree, and this is a concern. I want to avoid a train wreck, because that's the path I'm scared to death from.
And it sort of goes back to the purpose of us migrating to this new HRM system, because the old system, quite honestly, is very limited in what we can do with it. And, and so I'll bring it back. We'll bring it back, obviously, as the city manager has suggested. But part of the issue that we have in applying it, differently, as you've read and I've read in the law, is the capabilities of the system.
And I have to agree with you there. Some systems, you're right.
So
you're right.
That's why we decided to go this particular route as opposed to that. But I'll come back with a full update at the direction of the city manager.
I guess if and I'm not sure if August is the day we have to use. I guess if we had more time we can't go backwards, but it would seem like it would almost be better in preparation for this had we deducted a very small amount from their checks as we went along, and then on that gap day, let them have the money. But that may not be feasible either. I share the concern of the other councilors. We're just trying to resolve an issue.
And trust me, staff involved in this were also concerned, and we looked at every possible, way. And we know it's something because of the new software and because of the way we pay people, we got to do something. And so I think we all agree with that. We just got to figure out how to transition everybody over without having an adverse impact on their households, their living.
And this is not to beat up on finance, because I think I've told you, young lady, that you did an admirable job your first time. So I'm in your camp and Pam and everybody else's. But when you sit down with individuals, and my place is like Las Vegas, anyone can come and no one knows it. So I've had a number of employees just not complaining about the government, saying, Pop Barnes, what we're going to do? I have found that $132.15, that's not even groceries, much less trying to get back and forth, buy gas, get back and forth to work. And we're talking 62 of the public works that I know. So, but I don't know how many are in the government system. And it was an eye-opener to me, because first of all, I think it's a good idea for us to go into this pay conversion. I think it's great. It makes things easier. But at the same time, it was like me running into a brick wall. When you start talking to people, they're telling you that they've got, and you are right, which I didn't know, that some of the, and I'm not jumping on daycare individuals, people that work at daycare, but whether you take the child 3 days or 5, you got to pay out your pocket. So how are you going to take care of your child? How are you going to get to work? How are you going to buy groceries? Their school opening, how are we going to buy all the erasers and things like that off $132? And I'm just taking one case. And let me just tell you what a good employee, this employee that I'm taking on a 40-hour pay, they even have a dollar taken out of the 286.32, a dollar taken out for the United Way. So we have some really good employees, and we know that. We know we have good employees, and we do respect them, and we like them and support them. But a lot of times, like I said, we can run into and do things, and we're not perfect. We forget things. We need people to come down the public agenda. We need people to stop us and tell us, because none of us are perfect, and we overlook. And this is something that I think that we need, because it makes me think about a lot of the rough days that I had, my younger days, and when I had no pay dues and stuff and all like that and whatever, and trying to go to the kitchens and the shop, try to get food for the families and the food lockers. We don't really want that for our employees, and I know none of us up here do. And so that's the only reason why I'm bringing that up. I think you all in the finance are doing a good job, city manager, mayor, and all, and us. I just think it's just something that we just read into now and just thinking about, because I didn't think about it until it was brought to my attention.
Councilor Thomas?
I also would like to, we don't need to talk about it now if you're going to bring it back next week, but also take a look at other deductions that are coming out of the checks. If there's some way we can maybe not take them out of this check, but take it out, not double up. That's not what I'm saying at all. But, if there's some way you can, take the health insurance, if it normally comes out the first check of the month, could it come out the second check of the month? Just take a look at that to see any of those kinds of deductions that we can move around, or maybe, and I don't know that there is, but if you just take a look at it and maybe bring it back as you're bringing back the other things next time. Thank you.
Well, and just as city manager, I'd like to just express my appreciation for your concern, all of you, about, the situation, because I mean, it is going to have an impact on our employees. And I know that they're thankful that you are talking about this today, and we're going to talk about it next week, and expressing your concern.
And it's those employees who make the least that it's going to have the biggest impact on.
Yeah.
I see no more questions. I take that back. Councilor Huff?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. City Manager, don't want to make anybody else mad in the employee base, but is there a way we give vacation time? Could finance look at upper level employees and see if there's a way, how much money we have to come up with, if there's a way that upper level employees could lose that amount of money for a week or two to help the lower level employees?
I'm not following you there.
The ones with the bigger check.
Well, I would absolutely be opposed to that.
You couldn't do that if you got anyway.
You got to remember, it's all relative, and, even, you heard her just say about her daycare. So people live based on what they earn.
Yeah.
And,
I meant on volunteer basis. I didn't.
Yeah, and so, and I heard, something on TV recently that I shared with staff that said 70% of all working Americans are one paycheck from being homeless. And they didn't say at the lower end, that's from the low to the high, but because they're living based on what they earn.
I just meant on a volunteer basis. I didn't mean mandatory.
Yeah. Well,
Councilor Barnes, did you have your light on again?
I hear you.
Okay.
Councilor Barnes.
Thanks.
Councilor Barnes.
Do you have something else to say?
Okay.
No, he don't.
So I want a motion for adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you.